Okay, it's starting. Just had to reset the key, so it should be starting.
Oh, I was looking for a solution. Let's see. Still not seeing it.
It should get momentarily because I got the green bar, so should be coming up in a bit. Should be coming up. Should be coming up any minute. Yep, there you go. Should be popping up for everybody now. I'll
Can I confirm?
tweet it out now.
I'll do the same.
So, welcome to the stream, everybody. You guys can hear us. Yes, I have this Darth Vader motherfucker is the Ethisucks, as you guys know him. We'll get into that in a moment, but let me give you guys some context while you step in. It's kind of out of the blue, so it's a little bit unexpected for some of you that this is actually happening now. Um, had a couple of technical difficulties, but we're back and we're here, and we're gonna get started. So, some of you might have saw my stream a few weeks ago, I think it was, where I talked about clicks and cliques and all that good stuff. We talked about Ethan Ralph, and we talked about DDM some more, and we talked about a bunch of stuff. And in that, there was a specific topic, which is edtech, which is Thidrin's failed dig. And during that little topic, and when I said that, I also called out a group of people. Amongst them, I called out Ethisucks, and unlike QQ or Thidrin, all these other people, he had the testicular fortitude to come on. So we're going to be having a nice little conversation about some stuff, maybe about some not so nice stuff as well. But yeah, we're going to do that today. I'm pretty much just wasting time right now to make sure people can get the tweet. And yeah, so this is
Call
the.
on over, guys.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Call on over, guys.
Yeah. So we are here. We're going to be doing some talking. We have three big topics and a certain format because there's going to be a quasi debate in one of them. But we have three big topics. But before that, we're going to do some. We're going to call this pre-stream antics while people get the memo of what's going on because it is out of the blue. It is unexpected. Um, and I guess the we can talk about some kind of filler topics that have nothing to do with the stream itself, or might have something to do with the stream itself. Uh, and I think one of the most interesting ones, and you can jump in on this if you want. Uh, but one of the most interesting things I've been thinking about lately, or I've been reflecting, and I'm conflicted about, is Mr. Medicare and Patreon. That's been a interesting topic that is it kind of took everybody by surprise to the point that nobody really knew what to think. And I'm in that group. I didn't know what to think, to be 100% honest. On one hand, I've talked about Patreon in the past, and a lot of people think that I have an issue with Patreon. I have more of an issue with Kickstarter, to be 100% honest, but even in there's certain circumstances that can work too. But I've always equated Patreon to being kind of the beginning of how this anti-consumer society moves into a more pro-consumer, a necessary pro-consumer move because again, a lot of the entertainment industry is approaching a crash, I guess. And in today's world, there's a lot of things that were different. Like for example, our generation has no issue funding people. They have no issue paying for stuff. Piracy is at an all-time down. Digital piracy, excuse me, because our generation don't have a problem with forking over money. That, in and of itself, uh, it presents kind of an issue because of why they really don't have an issue giving people money based off of personality, based off of I feel like that person. Um, but I guess overall we can mark it as a positive and say that they're willing to pay for their stuff. They're willing to pay for things that they want, and you can say that especially in video games, there have been certain services like Steam that have kind of eliminated, or a GOG, that have kind of eliminated the need for for piracy. Excuse me. A need for piracy. So there's kind of that. And the way I've always seen Patreon is that it's kind of this way of saying, I'm going to give the world my full product, a product, not a piece of it, not a demo, but the full version of the product. And then the consumer is going to decide if it's worth money, which is how selling things should actually work, to be 100% honest. But we've gotten to a point where you can't really trust the product before you get it. So now we're kind of going into that reverse, into this, give me the product first and then I'll decide if paying you. So I've always said that if you're going to do Patreon, the right way to do it is to, whatever product you're producing, it has to be free. It has to be available to the public. And people like Sargon, for example, they don't do that. What they do is that they pretty much, put up a lemonade stand. They sell lemonade, and when they're out of lemons, they go to the street corner and start asking for money to buy lemons, rather than using the money that they made. And that example is specifically to the fact that Sargon has a Patreon for videos, but his videos are also monetized. Medicare, on the other hand, he didn't monetize his channel. It's still quote-unquote free. You don't have to fuck around with ads. And he's just saying, if you want to give me a tip, you can send that. And then there's this entire, he sounded extremely depressed, which was by design, in my opinion, because he is going back on his word. I don't know what the reasoning is. Everybody assumes that he's really sick or whatever. But again, here comes the problem of pseudo-anonymity. He can say that, and everybody likes him because of his videos, but none of us really know him. So we don't know if that's true. So on one hand...
There is some indication, though.
Go ahead.
There is some indication that he's out of money, in my opinion. In the past, he's complained about not having enough money to fix his computer. So,
well, I mean,
I think it's a money issue.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have no doubt that it's a money issue. What I doubt is that he has no other choice. Because again, the story that a lot of people are going with is he's sick and he has this terminal disease or something. That's kind of like the latest story about him. He has this big disease, and I guess insurance isn't covering him or whatever, and he needs money or he's gonna die. And that's kind of the story people are running with. We don't know why he doesn't have the money. You pointed out that he didn't have money to fix his computer. You're right. He said that. We don't know if he was lying. We don't know if his computer was fine at the time. We don't really know anything. And then comes the question, why doesn't he get a job? Then comes that issue. But again, we don't know anything about him. And I'm not knocking him on Patreon specifically, because again, he's doing Patreon the right way, in my opinion. If you're going to do it, you produce a free good with nothing behind a paywall, and then if people decide that they would like to fund you to see the good get better, they can do that. Like, I'm fine with that in that sense. I mean, because unlike other products, you can't really sell a video. You can't really do that. I do think that he's being a little naive in the fact that he thinks nothing's going to change. Something's already changed, and he hasn't realized it, or doesn't want to admit it, and it's the fact that now he has this big fat target on his back. The fact that he's going to Patreon indicates that he's dependent of it for whatever reason that we don't know, because he's not sharing that. So he's dependent on Patreon. All liberals have to do is take out his Patreon. That'll get him to shut up, or threaten to take it away. That's something that he's going to have to face, and he might have ways of dealing with that. But again, the issue comes back to pseudo-anonymity. Like, we don't know anything about him. If we knew who he was, we knew what he was dealing with, we knew what exactly the situation was, even if liberals were to take out his Patreon, we would find other ways. And you can still do that. You can still do it as a pseudo-anon, but it's difficult for me to empathize with something when it's a face behind a portrait that refuses to tell us. Like, he came out with this, and again, it's contradictory in my opinion to his message. If you look at it, I watched that video of him coming out and saying he's going to use Patreon at least 17 times. And one of the things that he says during it is that, sometimes in life you have to, eat shit and smile, and I get that. I've been through that. I can understand. That's a very empathetic statement, but that's what bothers me about it. It's a very, I can identify with that statement without telling us anything. For all we know, he could be a NEET who his mother isn't sending him money anymore. Mother got pissed off because she found his hentai, and now, he doesn't have money. But we don't know. Like, that is as plausible as anything else because we do not know. You do not know him, and that's an issue in my opinion. That is an. I mean, if he's gonna approach this as a job, and he's gonna approach this as, because he said there's no more gym time because if I'm gonna get paid, I might as well do it right. If you're treating this as a job, you are a company. You have to treat this as a company, or you have to treat yourself as.
Not only that,
Yeah. So.
it's now his livelihood. It's now his basically whatever rules that have been set out by Patreon are his rules. Full stop.
And now he is beholden to people now. Now he is in a position where if somebody goes after his Patreon, he might rethink things. So it's almost as if it's this quasi denial that he's kind of in, where he's kind of like, you know what, no, nothing's going to change, or it's just naiveness. Either way, I'm very curious to see how things are going to go because it is a very interesting position that he's in. We don't know why it's happening. We just know it happened. The real question is now, and here's another interesting thing. He said he used to make videos because he was interested, and he said gym time was because he was lazy. Well, I have a question. Was gym time exclusively because he was lazy, or there was nothing that inspired him to make a video? Because now he's making 4 videos a month, I guess. No, not 4 videos a month. I think it's 4 videos that are coming, or at least the ones that he has announced. So he's going to make X amount of videos a month. What happens if there's nothing that interests him? What happens if there's nothing that, if he wasn't getting paid for, he wouldn't make a video of, and he'd go away for a month or 2 months or 3 months? Because that's the entire thing that he's painted for himself. This entire idea that he is in fact this guy who only talks about what he wants and he's not beholden to anybody and all that good stuff. But now he is. So
that's exactly the problem with a lot of YouTubers, to be honest. Like, if it was just a matter of putting up a video when something is on, kind of like this channel, really. The person's genuine because they're not dependent on making new videos.
So
if they have to make new videos, then they're not going to really be talking about issues they care about. You can't have it both ways,
Yeah, and it's kind of like, again, people are actually in the chat. They're saying that they don't mind Jim getting shekels and all that stuff. But I'm gonna take a joke that Ra Zoriel made, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think I got a mass email from you, Ra Zoriel, that you have like a game going somewhere or something. If I'm not supposed to say that, please let me know and tweet me or something. And if I am, let me know so I can plug it. But it's kind of like he just said. He said, stop making games and make more videos for my entertainment. That's a wonderful point because it highlights I only do this when I want to. What happens if it stops being when I want to and becomes I have to do it? Then, I haven't had topics that have made me want to stream in a while. And if you look at my history, I don't stream that much. I don't do that many videos. I only do what I want to do. So that's why I have this erratic pattern of coming back, doing 4 or 5 things, and then going away for a while. If I was in a position where I have to do 4 videos a month, I would be talking about things that I don't care about. I'd be half-assed. And at the same time, I would be concerned on stepping on people's shoes because it could cause me problems to my livelihood if this was my livelihood. So Jim's going to find himself with those issues. I guess that's why he's been so much more active on Twitter, because he's been trying to make sure he looks at everything to see if he finds these issues. So again, it's possible if he just multiplies what he looks at by 10 and looks at all these things, maybe he'll find more things to inspire him. But I have a feeling that's eventually going to get to a cutoff point. It's eventually going to come into a position where he's just going to have to mail it home. And since, as best as we know, he's in this position where he's forced to make videos, he can't stop because, again, he has no other alternative. He had to come to Patreon for whatever reason that we don't understand. He's going to start either mailing it in, or he's going to start grouping up in cliques and doing collabs and shit, because that's where collabs come from at the end of the day. Sometimes it is two people who want to talk about the same thing, but most of the time is YouTubers without an idea who say, okay, I'll make a collab with this guy to get myself out there and make a video.
Can't really imagine him picking up that much material, to be honest. And he's done collabs in the past.
Yeah,
You remember the stream? What was it, Big Milo or something?
that wasn't his. He
There's
stepped
no
in.
below that.
That wasn't his. He stepped in, but again,
Yeah, but still.
he was basically just there, and but again, it shows how he was not beholden to anybody, and he still had to go there. And he says he just went there because he wants to, but let's be honest. And he didn't do
No.
anything there. Now imagine if his channel is on the line. Now he has to go there and smile for the camera and continue. It's a slippery slope. I mean, when you eat shit and smile, or when you eat shit and have to pretend to like it, depending if it's something, okay, I'm biting the bullet, like I'm gonna take this shit job to fund my game, for example. That happens. I've been there. This is me speaking from experience. Uh, but if you lose sight of the objective, then it becomes a slippery slope where you just start eating shit on a daily basis to the point that you're numb to it, to the point that you trick yourself into believing you're not eating shit, and that's
To the
very
point
very
where it
easy to
starts
go through.
tasting good.
Yeah, that's when it gets dangerous, when it starts tasting good. I mean, if you only get into the point that you're numb to it and it doesn't, because what the whole point of eating shit and having to smile is that it bothers you and it inspires you to go elsewhere, to make it temporary. You know, to say, okay, no, I need to, there's a reason why I'm doing this. But if it's, I'm just going to start doing it because I have no choice, then you kind of dig this hole and eventually it might even start tasting good, as you said. So how about we start with the topics? We got 10 people here, which is fine. Um, let's start. First off, to those who do not remember you or do not know who this Darth Vader guy is on the other side of this call, why don't you introduce yourself?
How could you guys forget me? Alright, let's go through some history. So, I'm just I guess you could call me a little troll from 4chan, 8chan, N-chan, etc. Um, I hang out on IRC mainly, and, well, I used to anyway. And you may have seen me on some streams on various channels in the past when we exposed Allison Prime as a man who's trying to get money for whatever real reasons behind it. Um, I also participated in opposing what I called ethics cocks, and these guys were basically the Occupy Wall Street of Gamergate. At least I thought they were. Now I have a lot more questions about Gamergate in general. Um, but in any case, that's really was my motivation to kind of stop corruption of what was a gamer's revolt at one point in time to save video games, and it slowly morphed to become about journalism, which, to be honest, most people don't give a shit about. Like, it was always about games, but then anyway, yeah, that's pretty much me.
Okay, so to sum it up, your ethic sucks.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's me.
the cat's out of the bag, and I asked you before the stream if we could talk about this. Cat's out of the bag in that sense, but you've been outed recently as having another Twitter account and of being quote unquote back. Um, do you want to talk about that Twitter account? Do you want to talk about why you came back?
Yeah, sure. So I had a whole bunch of work to get through, which is the reason why I left in the first place. And when that work cleared up, I kind of missed the people that I hung out with during Gamergate. Mainly you, Kelly, Phaedron, QQ, all the rest. So I decided to make a Twitter account, which was meant to be temporary at the time. Um, and I found myself in the middle of something, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I kind of got glued back into Twitter, mainly because of the US election, which by far was the most entertaining thing in recent memory, to be honest. So I couldn't really pull myself away from that, and it was quite entertaining.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair to say. Um, okay, so uh, you've been away for a while. You've been in a as we said, you had things to take care of, and you kind of came back, and you kind of came back with a different identity, um, a different Twitter. What's that Twitter? Do you want to say it, or it's
So
out there
it's
already?
no, I'll say it. It's I love Lunaco. It's currently on private, and if you're a follower, there's only a single tweet linking this video at the moment.
Okay.
Um,
So
yeah, I mainly use it for direct messages, so yeah, if you know me, you're already talking to me.
okay. So Reborn is and I'm mentioning specifically a name to put into context with things that we've talked about
That's fine.
in the past on this channel. So okay, so you've been kind of observing. I know you have the three sections of this stream already lined out. I think we're done with section one, I guess. Uh,
Do you want to talk about like recent things like
yeah, I mean that's a
Milo
segue.
and
That's a segue into
yeah?
into.
Oh,
Uh,
okay, cool, cool. All right,
um,
let's keep going then.
so you've been away for a while. You've been kind of in the shadows ever since you got back. Uh, I know you must be aware of the DDM, the QQ stuff, the me stuff, the Kelly stuff, everything that's been going on lately. I know that you've been aware of where e-celebs are now, what's going on. An example would be Milo coming out or being exposed as a pedo advocate at the very least, and allegedly at worst a pedophile himself. Um, Harmful opinions and Candid. We talked a little bit about Jim and his stuff. What has been kind of your thoughts through everything, and make an emphasis on the DDM and company stuff, and kind of get your thoughts before we start this second section.
Well, I'll be brutally honest to be fair. My first impression upon return was of great disappointment, especially with DDM, which has become indistinguishable from the V-Click, to be honest. And I was instantly repulsed by some of the people on there. I'll call them out. Why not? Templar Gamer. There's a whole bunch of people, and just the amount of collaboration you see and the pointless, like they don't have any direction at the moment, to be honest, or they didn't have any direction when I returned. So there's very few people from there who I maintain contact with, and um, I'm sure people understand what was DDM. What they may have thought was DDM is no longer what DDM is now, which is really a den of degeneracy, to be honest.
Okay. So let's get a little bit into that. Let's get a little bit into DDM. What you said that this is not what they, that they aren't what they used to be. I argue against that, but that's for later. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how DDM began? What was its genesis, and what is your relationship with it?
Yeah, sure. So apparently, because I wasn't around, I'll just give the brief history as it was given to me. Um, it was a stream, like a 24/7 stream that was on Twitch at one point in time. And the full name is the Dorito Doxxing Views and Moritos, which is a pun on Mountain Dew and Doritos. Um, it was mainly used to discuss a lot of the digs that was going on. And I heard from others that at one point in time, people were quite productive on there. Over time, the numbers of people dwindled, and I kind of came on well after things pattered down, to be honest. And the number of people on there was very little. I didn't see any real work going on, but it wasn't cancerous. Like there was some cancerous people on there, but it wasn't the dominant thing. Today is a very different matter. It's just full on cancer. It's just irredeemable at this point.
Okay. But tell us a little bit. Let's go even further back. Tell us a little bit about, because it's not a secret that you've worked with Thidrin. It's not a secret that you've worked with QQ. An example is the stream where you guys showed kind of QQ's first big thing, which was when he exposed the uh, what was the Skype group, the chat, I guess, where a bunch of e-celebs were all coordinating for the SPJ, and that streams with you, him, and Kelly, for example, on Kelly's channel. Tell us a little bit about how you met each of these individuals. You don't have to go into too much specifics to keep things that you spoke about behind the scenes quiet, but tell us a little bit about how you met each of these people. You know, some of the things that you can publicly say about how you worked with them. An example, as I just gave you. And if you want, you can focus specifically on Bacon, QQ, Thidrin. Yeah, let's start with those three.
Alright, so in all those cases, I met those people on IRC, and it was only later that the identity of the leaker really was revealed, and
The leaker of
to,
what?
to the Sargon SPJ
Okay.
conspiracy, I suppose.
Okay.
Um, and that's the point where we then had some more direct contact through direct chat and stuff. And really, the central figure is Thydrin. That was the dude running most of the stuff back then, I suppose. He was the head moderator of Burgers and Fries. I think he still is. I'm not sure. I haven't been on since, but I know he's away. He's a bit busy at a certain store in the US at the moment. So yeah, I'm not sure what he's up to now.
But before we continue, I'm at my core. I'm a showman. Can you please say I am your father? Okay, that should make a couple of people happy. Oh, and also, can you say the fire rises?
Fire rises.
There you go. Okay, so audience can't say I don't spoil them. So getting back on topic, so when you came back, when did you start to realize? Well, wait. You said that Thidrin was kind of the guy who was running a lot of this stuff. Tell us about your interaction with Thidrin. What do you think about him? What is your opinion of him at that time? Let's leave present impressions for later. What was your thoughts of this guy at the time of working with him? And another interesting thing that I'd like you to talk about. You said you met these people on IRC. Uh, People like King of Pole has constantly cried about quote unquote IRC fags. Are those the quote unquote IRC fags? I know that anything King of Pole says is spurgy, but for fairness, I'm throwing that in there. So, Thidrin,
Yeah,
thoughts of
I
him at the
mean,
time and IRC fags. Go ahead.
it wasn't our group. Like, anybody could use IRC. But I guess that's the group they generally mean when they say IRC fans. Yeah.
Okay.
So
So,
my thoughts on Quadrant, to answer your first question.
yeah.
Um, so Quadrant seemed pretty fair. He was the head moderator, and I rarely saw him use his moderation power except when it was called for. Um, he had generally the right ideas, and he connected people together. He didn't do much of his own work, but I guess that wasn't really his shtick.
What do you mean he didn't do much of his own work?
Just he wasn't a digger. He wasn't a stream producer. He didn't produce any original content. He was more of a spreader. He was more of a liaison guy.
Okay, so his entire role was to spread stuff. Okay. Um, so let's talk a little. Let's go a little bit further into this. So the connections, the original, to paint a picture, I guess. And we're not going to call it necessarily a click. Well, I call it a click, but we're not, for the sake of this conversation, call it a click. But those people who are in these IRC groups, like Burgers and Fries, you pointed out people like Thidrin. Is it fair to say that Bacon and QQ were also a part of that initial group that you first got in contact with?
They were, but it wasn't a single group, so to speak.
A
It was
network of
many
groups.
different. It was networks of groups, and I guess Fodrin would be in each of them.
Okay. So Thidon was in a bunch of these networks of groups. What did you do at the beginning? Let's talk about that first. What first stop would you like to talk about? I guess where would you like to start when it comes to like the first time you really worked with him in a manner that was relatively public and isn't a big secret? Uh,
The,
would
the first big one was the Sargon takedown.
Okay, I expected that. So Sargon's thing. At the time, I didn't really know any of these groups, to be honest. I'd been introduced personally to Thydrin and stuff, but he had nothing. Well, he had a little bit to do with my article, with the worst part, and we'll reveal that later. But he didn't do any spreading or anything for me, at least. He kind of showed up and said, "Oh, you're doing this, okay," and kind of did what he does, which is attach his name to things without merit. But when you initially did that work, what people did you meet during this thing, and did you connect people? I mean, what would you qualify your role in that specific dig as?
Good question. So the people I met was, well, actually, I only met one person, and that person was John Kelly. Um, we sort of didn't really work per se. I just kind of tried to coordinate him a bit. He wasn't cooperative at the beginning, mainly because he had no idea who I was. But over time, we got a bit close, and he pretty much was very easy to work with,
Is
I
it fair
think.
to say that over
Um,
time, maybe, and I'm sorry to cut you off, is it fair to say that over time, maybe after this dig and a little into the future, you got close to the QQ as well in this work style
well,
relationship?
QQ actually came very late into my presence as Ethisucks, and we got close very quickly. I suppose you could say that,
And
but
is it fair
I
to
pretty
say,
much disappeared for a long time.
is it fair to say, and I know I'm jumping because again, we're talking about the Sargon dig and QQ wasn't really a part of that. But is it fair to say that this was somebody that you would prop up as somebody who people could work with?
Well, he really had good OPSEC, which is very important. And yeah, why not?
Okay.
I would actually say that too.
Okay.
That's the impression he gave me.
So okay, we don't want to get too much into the whole how Sargon thing happened because that's a story that I get very involved with. But let's go a little bit further.
Yeah.
Let's go a little bit, yeah, and people don't want to hear me talking for 45 minutes. Um, but okay, so let's go a little bit into the formation of DDM. The story I have, or one of the stories I have, is it would be fair to say that a lot of these people who connected through IRC, who met each other through this Sargon dig and beyond, uh, kind of combined and got together and created what we know today as DDM. It's certainly fair to say that with Thydrin and QQ. It's certainly fair to say that with Bacon. It's certainly fair to say that with Dan, who we're leaving out, who is Azurain, who's QQ's editor, or QQ's video editor, script writer, whatever weird homosexual relationship thing they have going. Uh, it seems that all these people met around that time, and then they were forming kind of cells of people, and that all these cells seem to have met up. Excuse me. People who were maybe working on the same thing but not together eventually all met up, and this DDM thing kind of happened. Is that fair to say? If it's not, if there's any context that you would like to add, go ahead.
You pretty much hit the nail. You pretty much hit the nail with the hammer on the head. So that's basically what's happened, and I actually think that's probably the source of the problem. In that if you kept these people separate, you wouldn't have a cancerous situation. You could work with them separately and on specific goals without getting their personality involved into it. But once you combine all these people, they naturally have to start defending each other. And if one single person is wrong about something, then the entire group has to defend it regardless of whether they think it's true or not. Would you agree with me?
No, I would say that the problem goes much beyond that. I think that these people should never have been trusted to begin with. Um, but that comes a little bit later. I mean, again, you can't never trust a degenerate, and these people have given signs of being degenerates for quite a long time. It's not new. It's not. It was new to me, I guess, when it comes to Thydrin. I didn't know that he was. I knew he was a loser. I didn't know he was it was a degenerate until much later. And QQ, I've always kind of suspected. Uh, and again, I've never been the kind of person that checks people's Twitters a lot, but he did spread a lot of degeneracy, so it should have been obvious, so that was my bad. But no, I don't think it's a situation of keeping them separate. I think it's a situation of you cannot work with degenerates, period. Because at the end of the day, the goal has to be eliminate degeneracy. It can never be a part of any. It can never be a part of any long-term goal at all. It has to go, and if you work with them, you kind of value them. You got to give them value. You kind of excuse their disgustingness, and you give them power. Because again, most of the people that we've been talking about are in my opinion, huge narcissists, and they can't keep their things quiet. That's why they met, because they are incapable of keeping their things quiet and just doing things because it's the right thing to do. They all want to have their name attached to things, and they all want to be engrossed, propped up, I guess, while at the same time being pseudo anonymous. So that's why I disagree. Would you think that's fair of me to say? And if not,
I
go
would
into it.
actually say that you're pretty much right. To be honest, like let's look at a bit of history, if you don't mind, of Gamergate itself, where we had a lot of examples of transgendered people basically throwing the entire revolt like away just because they got triggered one time. One major example was Devi Ever. Do you remember that man?
Yeah, but refresh everyone's memory. She was a game dev, quote unquote. Uh, but
Yeah, he was a game dev,
yeah,
and he also, I think he had a Patreon or
he showed his
something
tits on
to
Revolt,
do
didn't he?
music.
His man tits that are pretending to be a
Oh,
woman.
please don't
Yeah,
remind me. I accidentally clicked on that thread, and
yeah.
I honestly almost threw up. Like
I, I,
seriously.
I actually was one of the few people who was able to get away with not seeing that, and then a certain motherfucker who will remain unmentioned sent me something and said, "Hey, look at this archive," and it was that. I was like, "Well, fuck you too." So, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
that degenerate.
that's fucking disgusting. That's the thing. It's
It's
just
that fucking degenerate. So yeah,
I can't really handle that stuff. So the thing is with degenerates in general, I tend to just ignore that part of them and hope they get better. Maybe I'm naive, you know. Over time, I've been constantly proven wrong, so I'm not going to contradict what you're saying, to be honest.
so yeah, we disagree, I guess, and we can agree to disagree in that sense. But
No, no,
okay, so
I'll actually say that I agree.
okay, um, so we do have this initial formation of DDM, but something that needs to be added to the story is GG Revolt. Now, obviously, my experience with GG Revolt started with the whole Sargon thing. There were one of the few people, a few groups that not only would give me a chance and would listen to what I have to say and agreed with a lot of what I had to say and saw what I was doing as I guess righteous and correct, but they were talking about it too before I came along. I mean, I guess I was the guy who made it popular, but they were the guys who initially talked about it in their own contained group, and Sargon didn't like them as a result. And then came the thing where Sargon made the video calling me the king of revolt and yada yada yada. Uh, Revolt unfortunately has gone down the shitter. But let's talk about Revolt at that time, because on one hand you have these people who are getting together and going to form later down the line what we know today as DDM. But you also had Revolt kind of happening at the same time and becoming getting to its peak at the same time as the quote unquote Sargon takedown or Sargon dig or whatever people want to call it, which I was tangentially. Well, not tangentially. I mean, my article was kind of the catharsis, I guess. But I wasn't talking to all these people behind the scenes, and I think you can confirm that. I did talk to Thidrin though, but I wasn't in these. I don't use IRC, so I didn't know all these people. So you bring an interesting perspective. But let's talk a little bit about Revolt and how that started and what that was supposed to be, because I believe you knew about Revolt before I did. Is that fair to say?
Oh yes. No, no, it's very fair. I actually conceived of Revolt well before it happened. Um, so I'll give you an insider's perspective without revealing any information that was revealed to me in confidence, if that's fine with
Go
you.
ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So back before Revolt was a thing, there was only one place to discuss Gamergate. Okay, I tell a lie. There was only two places you could discuss Gamergate without having a pseudo anonymous identity attached to you, which was GGHQ and the V threads. Both of them were controlled by the same clique, which was the V clique at the time. At the beginning, they didn't have a heavy hand and allowed open discussion. But when matters that hurt the game industry in their perspective, such as boycotting not video game, boycotting certain publishers or certain studios or anything with an effect on the game industry, or any discussion about the cultural war, for example, was rapidly being censored. And about a month after GGHQ was opened up, the whole SPJ thing began. And to me, that was a huge red flag. Do you recall those times?
Yeah.
Maybe you didn't use HN at the time, but yeah.
Yeah, I heard about it kind of through the grapevine. I mean, the beginning of HN for me was Revolt. I kind of started using it because again, I was more of different circles. I was more of, straight up Facebook or straight up YouTube, even 9gag a little bit for a while. But it's kind of like I did the whole Sargon thing, and then it was kind of a waking up. I kind of had an idea that YouTube was fucked with the Angry Joe stuff, and the people I met through the Angry Joe stuff. And the people I met through the Angry Joe stuff were 4chaners. And, they were kind of the people saying, you're doing the right thing, yada, yada, yada. And I kind of got my own shitstorm with the Angry Joe stuff, but because I was so well liked by the people, not by the higher ups, but by the people in the community, that wasn't so bad. I mean, there were a couple of people who tried to flag my channel and whatever, but it overall didn't work, and Joe spurged gloriously. But when it came to the Sargon thing, Sargon was very much entrenched, and the thing with Gamergate and the thing with movements or revolts or whatever you call them in general is that people seek structure. This no leaders thing doesn't work. People will organically seek out structure naturally. It's in human behavior. We seek to form a organized society, not a chaotic one. And when people started following Sargon, he became an idol to them. He wasn't just the guy talking about the things they believed in. He was an idol. So when I did the Sargon thing, a lot of people took that opportunity to throw shit my way. And, somebody came to me and said, hey, they're listening to you here. And I read the stuff on Revolt 8chan at the time, and I could see, oh yeah, these people get it, and they're not the same. Because again, the whole point of the YouTube community is to make you think that is the entirety of the internet community. So it was kind of a feeling I'm doing the right thing, but nobody seems to be listening. And then it was like, no, there is a community of people who are tired of this shit, or tired of Kia. And I used Kia for a while, is another thing that a lot of people don't get. There's a piece of the timeline that people miss is when I was doing the SJW Gamer series, which was pretty successful. And if I would have just not bothered anybody and, would have been a good boy and lowered my head and just done that, I'd probably have, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 subscribers now. Because again, all those entertainers, those pure comics of Gamergate, they're all gone. If I would have endured it and would have stayed doing just that, I would probably be an e-celeb myself. But again, I have this thing called integrity, and when I felt that the series was done and I didn't want to churn it out and I didn't want to, just go through the motions, I thought, okay, this stage is done, and let's go to the next. But yeah, I think that overly answers your question. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's fine. So that kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Medicare. I kind of, in your life, you don't need to make videos, so you could have just ended it there. But if you were dependent on it, you'd have to keep churning it out. But yeah, so back to GG Revolt. Basically, the way you deal with censorship is to constantly agitate the censor, which in the case of GGHQ was Acid Man. And he decided to basically hammer down any kind of meme that could threaten his authority or threaten SVJ, the most important event of Gamergate. And everybody called to pick a e-celeb to represent them. It's almost like you're picking the people who won Gamergate on the side of the gamers, and ironically, the entirety of the board ended up being either V quick shells like what's his name, Mark Set, or Breitbart connected people, which is very interesting, isn't it? But anyway, back to GG Revolt. A lot of us were kind of tired of that shit, and we wanted things to go back to the way they were back when we had a board where we could discuss anything we really cared about, and it was mostly gaming, mostly um, trying to stop people from ruining games, you know? And that wasn't happening anymore. It was all about, journalistic ethics. And if you didn't discuss that, then you were pretty much kicked out. At one point in time, do you remember the Sarah Nyberg, well, quote unquote, Sarah Nyberg event?
Yeah, the Sarah Butts thing. What was his real
Yeah.
name? Nick Bates? No, that's not Nick Bates. Nick Bates is something completely
I
different.
thought Nyberg is his real name. I
Yeah, but
forgot what his
so like
first
Bill
name was.
Nyberg.
But anyway,
Go ahead.
yeah, that might be. There was a long thread about it where people were doing some solid digging and pretty much uncovered him as a pedophile. And out of nowhere, one of the moderators deleted the entire thread, and that was before it was archived. So to me, that was the point when GGHQ began to fall. And there was a lot of noise to change the leadership, change the rules, but they didn't want to move on. They pretty much stuck to their guns. The V thread was laughing because they treated GGHQ as a little cockshed where you could only talk about journalistic ethics, and they pretty much admitted that that was their goal. Their goal was to kill the separate board, which they regarded as a what do they call it? Help me out here. I forgot the name they gave it. The honey pot. That's it. They called it a honey pot. So they pretty much gleefully killed the only real discussion that was going on amongst gamers, and that forced us to go to slash poll and ask for help. And they gracefully allowed us to have a constantly updated thread where we threw around ideas, and eventually we decided to make a thread, sorry, not a thread, a board called GG Revolt. And ever since then, the VQuick eCelebs and VQuick connected major accounts pretty much shot on GG Revolt. Interestingly, at the time, Thydrin also joined in shitting on it, by the way.
On what?
GG Revolt.
So Thynon was originally against GG Revolt. Can you go into detail?
Yes. Well, at least publicly, he said he was against it because it would basically split people up. And to be fair, it did, but when you're embedded with shit, you better get off it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it split cancer away from people who actually gave a shit about what they were talking
Yeah,
about. But
yeah,
then again,
exactly.
Didrin is probably one of those people who believes in purity spiral, aka having standards is a bad thing. Um, but again, it's interesting that Thidrin was originally against GG Revolt, and he wanted us all to be good boys and stay. He also had his hand in that he wanted to be the board owner, uh, uh, or was the board owner, whatever, when it came to Gamergate on 8chan, and that kind of went up in smoke. But I like that anything Thidrin cannot control, or anything that Thidrin does not own directly is getting a little bit too organic for him, he doesn't like. And it's funny that now he has indirect control of GG Revolt through Male Goddess. So it's very interesting to see the history of these things when you go forward. Now I want to talk a little bit about. We've talked a little bit about the origins of DDM. We talked a little bit about your involvement with its members and what they've done. So you come back, you're here, and you're looking at things, and you are disappointed with DDM. Is it fair to say you're disappointed with its individual members, Thidrin, QQ, Male Goddess? I'm going to shove in there because people like to use the straw man of DDM is just the team speak and Male Goddess isn't part of the team speak. Henceforth, he's not part of DDM. I'm just going to shove that in there to trigger those people. But Azu Rain, for example, what are your thoughts? You come back and you look at these people and what they're doing. Is it fair to say first off that you came back before the fight between us being me and Kelly, and them started?
Apparently, it was around the same time,
Okay.
which is a complete coincidence, by the way.
So you come back and you're seeing this happen. What are your thoughts?
Well, I listened to the stream, and honestly, I don't really know what got into Sidron, but you pretty much kicked his ass,
You're talking
and
about the debate stream where he says, we need public education and government funding because it lowers crime, and I say no, that's provably false. And he spurred. You're talking about that one,
yeah,
correct? Okay.
correct. So he got really upset, I suppose.
Okay, so you're at wait, so you're at that
And
time. You're at that time, and you're looking at that stream. At that time, what is your thoughts of DDM?
well, before I get into that, at that time, I wasn't really speaking to a lot of people. I was waiting for people to find me just from the way I was signaling, and only a few people bothered to do that. I think Kelly was one of them, but they didn't really let me in on the inner happening. So to me, it was just a stream, and I thought, oh, you guys will get over it, and Sidron will admit his wrong, and then everything will be okay. But apparently, that's not how things went down. Apparently, he didn't admit his wrong, and things escalated, and yeah. So when I eventually heard the full story, I was very disappointed with DDM. Specifically, after pretty much trying to go after you, they went after Kelly in a big way, and that just turned things into I think at that point things would never be the same, to be honest.
So wait, let's put dates on this. Let's put at least quasi dates. So this stream with him happened about I don't know. I'd say I'm looking at them right now. Um, it was an ultra stream. It was one of the last ones. So this happened about Mayish, between April and May. It's one of
Yeah.
these two streams. So it's May and April 2016. So you're looking at them. How long did it take you to kind of look at this group and say, um, how long did it take you to look at all these individuals? When I say this group, I'm also talking about QQ, who has a tendency to operate to what people would think is away from DDM. That was proven to be false in the deletion stream later on. But what was your thoughts of, for example, let's take QQ as an example. What was your thoughts of QQ and Dan at that time? And I'd like to start bringing in things like the Ralph clique. I'd also like to start bringing in things like the Grapes. What were your thoughts of these two individuals and of those two groups that I just mentioned at this time, May 2016, April, May 2016?
Well, honestly, Dan really made a huge mistake with Kelly. Um, at one point in time, I think Kelly, after the stream that he had with Fodron, he was arguing on DDM, the actual channel. And this is secondhand information for people listening, but I kind of cross-checked it with people, and I'm pretty sure my version of events is what went down. Um, Dan pretty much started attacking Kelly for going after Jennifer Doll. Am I correct on this?
We'd have to leave Kelly to explain that. I do know that Jennifer Doll was kind of Kelly's pet project, and I do know
Yeah.
that Dan
So,
attacked
so,
the.
for people who don't know
No,
Jennifer
wait.
Doll,
Let,
it's
let
a
me
failed
specifically
game.
explain what happened there. I do know that Jennifer Doll was brought into the group, in this big DM group. There was a whole bunch of people. Because Kelly was saying this, and I'll let you explain what she is. But she's a game developer who hasn't delivered. That's pretty much the summary of what she is. And he was talking about her, and Dan has connections to her, and I believe he was the one that brought her into the group. Either him or Templar. Excuse me, it might be Templar. I'll let Kelly correct me in post. I'm assuming that Kelly will eventually come on the stream, not today, but some other time, and we'll set the we'll correct that record. We'll CTR it real hard. But I do know that Dan and I believe Templar was also in on it too, were the people white knighting for Jennifer Daw. Explain who Jennifer Daw is for the audience, if you want to add
So
anything to my.
Jennifer Doe is she's an extremely cancerous failed game dev who's never delivered a single functioning prototype as far as I know. And she doodles like retarded little, I guess you could call them cute, but I mean, anybody could draw that kind of shit, to be honest. And that's pretty much all she does. And she's gathered a huge audience within Gamergate. And here's a fun fact: she was one of the original SPJ panelists. So there is something very questionable
It's funny how
about this
these people
individual.
all tie back together. Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit because
Yeah,
we don't want to be here all day. We do have a third topic that is important. So let's fast forward. Final deletion happens. This is July 2016. The final deletion happens. It showed because this is about the time that Kelly gets doxxed. He gets doxxed about in June, and there's a lot of people who were involved in
yeah.
it. There were
The grapes who are connected to DDM, they went hard after Kelly. They went after his family, which is disgusting to be honest. And they they were doing a lot of horrible things trying to bring him down. They blackmailed him at one point in time, I believe, which is illegal, by the way. And what's his name? Was it Craig who blackmailed him? I don't remember. Uh, Craig Mansfield? Well, I might be off
Yeah,
on the
Craig is a
actual
Jew.
number
Craig
who
is a
did.
Jew, by the way. Just wanted to add that in there. He's a literal Jew.
Yeah, so they were up to a lot of shit, and that really brought Kelly down. I tried to help. I suggested at the time that he take some time off, and because really, when it comes to these things, the best way to deal with them is to kind of take the air out of the situation before coming back, or perhaps coming back under a different name or anything.
Clearly, I
But
disagree with
Kelly,
that.
Kelly is a
Clearly, I disagree with that. But
yeah,
go on.
that's fine. Like I know. Like everybody has a different strategy, but I didn't have any malice in suggesting that. I just wanted the best for Kelly at the time. So they failed to bring down Kelly, and they did put him through a lot of. They put him in a really bad spot. I wish they could understand what they did. Like, and I wish they could understand that
Okay,
everybody who
let's get away
contributed to
from
that,
that in particular.
everybody who
I'm
contributed.
interested more in. So the final deletion happens, which is after Kelly, got doxxed, and it is shown that DDM are pretty much the goons directly involved in this situation. We have recordings of Coral talking about it. We have recordings of Fuzztail and QQ is involved, and Dan and Thidrin at one point as well. So, what is your thought? This is July. When the final deletion happens and expose that these people are pretty much the V click. What are your thoughts on DDM and of these individual players at that point?
My thought was just break it up, like just kill it, because it's just become exactly what we were fighting. I don't know if they were fighting that, but that's exactly what we were fighting. And just to have it reform again under a label that was previously known as Clean was really bad. So I'll give you some background. I was in a DM group with DDM for about 3 days, and I just couldn't stand it. Like, so I just left in disgust. And this was back in June, I think. So they were really hitting uh, Kelly at the time.
Oh yeah, they were mad because Thidron was exposed to be garbage. I kind of did that, and to be a liberal also, because Thidron was this idiot who likes to say he doesn't believe in the left and right paradigm, but he's a liberal. So you said that you pretty much, to sum up your thoughts on DDM, you say that it needs to be broken up and it's kind of cancerous. But what are your thoughts on the individual players? Thidrin, QQ, Dan, Male Goddess. I want to see, what are your thoughts at that time of them?
So let's go through each of them like one at a time. So Male Goddess is kind of put it this way: when you start behaving exactly the same way as Acid Man has, it's time to kind of retire. Because I mean, that's not the point of GG Revolt. You shouldn't have really revealed yourself. You should have stayed anonymous as we agreed on the original threads, and not politicized your moderation, and really not involved in yourself in the conversation. I understand as the number of people dwindled, the temptation rises to turn GG Revolt into a clique of its own. But look what's happened. It's dead. You've basically killed it. So
Well, yeah, but that
yeah,
happened because
that's not all.
he couldn't control GG Revolt. That a lot of people in there agreed with me, and I know that because I still talk to a lot of those people. And anything Thydrin cannot control, he destroys. Because again, Thydrin believes he can make a difference in certain things, but he is ineptly a failure. He's a loser. So he always fucks everything up. So he's the worst kind of narcissist. He believes that he's the best at everything, that he can control things, but everything he doesn't control is kind of broken down. Now,
We'll get more into that.
yeah, we'll get more into
later,
that
yeah.
a little bit later.
So
But so okay, so in July you're thinking again. Let's go through the individual members. Thydrin, thoughts of July
yeah,
of Thydrin on after the final deletion.
like honestly, you should have gotten back on Varlo's channel and argued your point. He he gave you a chance to redeem yourself, and you decided to just ignore him, which
Okay, but
is pretty cowardly, to be
remember the
honest.
final deletion also covered the DDM shit. So it's not just that. Is that the only thing you thought of at that time? If
No,
it
no,
is, it's
no.
fine. I
So
just reminded
I'm
you.
just going through the thoughts like
Okay.
chronologically. Sorry. So and everything you've done since then has only contributed to the problem, including the stuff in final deletion. So it's pretty much just digging a hole at that point.
Okay, so that's Thydrin. What about QQ?
Yeah, you really shouldn't have stood by and allowed all this to happen, to be honest.
Okay.
Um, and really, again, just like Fidrin, the more the problem got entrenched, you picked a side, and unfortunately, you've, you know, you're in the same ditch now.
Just to clear up to the audience because it might sound confusing, when I say the name and you're saying stuff, when you say you, you're referring to the person I'm talking about, not me, Verlo, the host.
Yes, I'm referring to QQ
Okay,
specifically.
so let's keep going. Dan.
Oh, Dan, seriously, like, why did you think that you could defend Dawn? And that, like, what were you thinking? You broke up the relationship between you and Kelly over that, and it's just, I don't know what you're thinking, honestly. Like, I didn't have much interaction. I don't think I interacted at all with Dan specifically until I returned. But upon hearing the full story, I'm really not impressed.
Okay. Um, Male goddess. Just to fuck
Oh,
with
we
me.
already went. We already spoke about him, but sure. Seriously,
Sum
dude,
it up.
like transfer Gigi Revolt to a really anonymous person and try and make Gigi Revolt great again. Because there's a kernel of good in it, and you don't know what's going to happen in the future in the gaming scene. You want to have an active Revolt that can react to the stuff.
Templar.
Kill yourself,
Koro.
dude. Get yourself checked in the head because you're just seriously.
Can't even.
I can't even. I don't even want to go there.
Bacon.
Yeah, like what happened to you, dude? You've been really cold since you didn't even bother following me.
Okay,
Am I
so
not? Do I have not enough clout for you or something?
so okay, this is July around the final deletion. Why we're currently in the current year plus two. It's 2017 February. That's a lot of months in between then and now, and you clearly had strong thoughts about them in July 2016. What took you so long to speak out publicly against them? Or have you spoken to them behind the scenes? Is that what's been going on? I mean, what can you share there?
Well, I can't really reveal details, but it's closer to the second alternative you've mentioned. I tried to do my best to kind of patch things up, which was probably extremely naive. I know you probably agree with me in saying that. And that didn't work out. And the fault lies not with Kelly in the case of him and them. The fault lies with Phaedron, and he knows why.
Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit more. I'm gonna show some links real quick. I'm gonna show some stuff. because now we're in a position where these people are cancer. You agree with that sense, right? You agree that I think they've always been cancer, but at the very least we can agree that currently they are cancer. QQ, Thydrin, Dan, Templar, and pretty much that clique of people. We didn't really get too much into the grapes, but I think your opinion of them is pretty low as well. Before we go any further,
I think they're subhumans, to be honest. Like the grapes, if everything I said about DDM stands, the grapes are subhumans. Like I don't even regard them as people.
so question for you. Now that we've explained that they're all cancer, QQ Media happens. And this is QQ's personal site. And somebody we haven't talked a lot about that you can give your opinions on, Fuzztail, who's allegedly been friends with Thydrin for years, for almost a decade. When was your first?
I can give you my impression. I'll give you my impression because I actually encountered Fuzztail around the time Gamergate was just starting. When I noticed Gamergate, so just sorry, dying there for a second. So I encountered him at the very beginning of Gamergate, which was around 2014. Sorry, not around. It was September 2014. And at the time, he was against Gamergate. Well, not against Gamergate. He was against the revolt against cultural Marxism, basically.
That's shocking. He's a Marxist himself. Of course, he's against cultural.
Well, you can actually go back to his old tweets. They're all still there. I'm sure people have archived them.
You don't have to go to the old
He's shown his position.
He's currently a Marxist.
Oh, I don't. I really don't want to look at his account, but yeah. So back then, I was just disgusted from this guy, and I remember actually fighting with him on Twitter, and then he didn't block me, but he started ignoring me at the point. Probably muted my account. So yeah, my opinion of him is sub-zero, to be honest. If grapes are subhumans, then he's sub-bacteria.
Fair enough. Okay, so Fuzztail is shit. So QQ Media happens. Okay, QQ Media is a thing. QQ is trying to begin his own little media empire. And to put into context, we talked about this in the last stream. But QQ has put out a video in the past where he said that the only purpose to, and I quote, the only purpose to creating a news blog is to hold influence, is to make money. I kind of, that last part, I botched the quote, but that's pretty much the spirit of what he said. You can go and watch the full quote on my previous video, just so he's not, he doesn't feel I'm taking it out of context, but then again, he blocked me, so he doesn't care that I'm taking him out of context. He refuses to answer. So they said that the only purpose to making a blog, a news blog, is to make money, is to gain influence, is to then sell it to the highest bidder in particular. The Medicare thing really highlights the fact of how people get monetization wrong. I think that only people who are monetizing shit are in it for cash. I'm not saying Medicare's in it for cash, but the reality is he hasn't monetized shit for 10 years, or at the very least 2 years for the people who've known him since Gamergate, and he monetizes in a day, he makes over $2,000 on Patreon. So when you have a following, you have influence, this idea that, well, if you don't monetize things, that doesn't mean you're after money, you're not after power, you're not after influence, is untrue, and QQ himself highlights it. And he creates this media site in where he is a kind of, he's quote unquote talking about news, but he wants to talk about sad puppies, and he wants Fuzztail to get an award and shit like that. And here you have these cancerous people working with him in QQ Media. Before we get into that, I'd like to show a tweet. This is kind of the context so that people know where I'm going with this. I want to show a tweet by Fuzzfreak in which he shows, well, here you go. This is what Fuzztail currently believes. To kind of sum him up a little bit, this is what Fuzztail currently believes. If he was president of the United States, he would make free weed for everyone, decriminalization of drugs, informed consent for HRT, which I interpret as hormone replacement therapy. I might be wrong. Maybe it's something else. Cut military spending, improve education, tax the rich, improve low-income bar, retain all cops to favor persuasion over force, streamline legal immigration, aggressively crack down on college loan sharking, uh, abolish copyright loan sharking. Excuse me, no, abolish copyright in favor of Creative Commons, improve ISP speeds, dismantle the surveillance state, declare free high quality healthcare an inalienable human right, and validate trade embargoes. So that's what Fuzztail currently believes, and he's working with QQ. Now, before we get into this debacle that is kind of around that time, I want to go back to a tweet. You said that ever since July, final deletion, you thought that these people were pretty much garbage. So I'm forced to ask you something that I showed in a previous stream. Here's a tweet of yours, November 2016, where you said, "Follow Friday, my recommended Patriots," and you put in Male Goddess, John Kelly, Thidrin, QQ, Dan, and Pave Darker. Now, Pave Darker, he's a supporter of Ralph. I don't dislike him, and I hope we can have a stream with him. But he's currently been defending Milo. He's currently been defending the situation on Milo. That's all over Twitter, and it's an argument that I had with him. So I have a question. After all the things you said, why did you tweet this out? Give me some context. Explain to me the logic of, what is it, 6 months after the final deletion, you consider this to be tweet worthy, I guess. If you can go ahead, please explain that.
Okay, cool. So to understand this tweet, you have to understand the context of the Follow Friday meme that QQ created, actually. It's when a group of people are fighting or hostile to each other, and then you lump one or more of them into the other group. And you'll notice Kelly's in there, and the rest of them.
So you're saying that it's just a joke.
It has some truth to it. So, I was initially going to recommend some Patriots, and I think Pave Darker has done a lot of good. He is part of the Ralph clique, and defending Milo is just, well, we'll get into that if you like, but let's just say I don't look positively on that at all. Yeah, so basically it was more of a reference to the fight more so than a serious tweet.
So you think that these people are disgusting, and you see a meme or follow up a meme of QQ by recommending these people. How would people know that only some of these are ironic and others aren't?
Well, at the time, it was more of a very inside joke, so I didn't really expect people to understand in general. And I'm not sure if my account was private or not.
It
Probably
was.
not, since
It
it's
was.
archived. It was? Okay, there you go. So it was really directed to people who would understand the context per se.
The people who like this tweet that we can see on screen are Pave himself, Christy Jr., somebody else from the Ralph clique, Thidrin, Dan, and QQ. So if it's a joke, it either went over their head, or they didn't think it was a joke and they considered, yeah, you should absolutely follow those Patriots. So,
Well, QQ certainly understands the joke at least. So that's 1 out of 5.
so he
But yeah,
likes he
like, so
likes. So wait a minute, QQ likes the fact that you're mocking him. And again, it's all, again. If I understand the context of the joke, it's just people who are fighting. You put them all in a group. We aren't fighting. We are ideologically against these people. That would be like saying, I've never seen this, but I've never seen a Follow Friday of, let's put Zoe Quinn and Anita Sarkeesian and Sargon of Akkad and myself and you and somebody else in a tweet chain. I've never seen that.
well, you can check QQ's old tweets. He used to do it with me and a bunch of V-Click people. I think he may have even added you, like, at one point in time.
No, he never did after the whole thing.
Oh, no, this is back in 2015, so
Okay, but
way back.
2015 we were on good terms. So him putting a
Yeah,
Follow
yeah, sure,
Friday
sure.
on me was at least felt at the time legitimate. This whole thing that it's actually a joke, this is the first I'm hearing of it.
But it wasn't really legitimate. It was more the fact that he placed you with people you were fighting against. So,
Okay. So, You believe that these people are garbage at the time, and you decide to make a joke. Well, okay, a joke's just a joke. So let's go a little bit forward then. Um, so QQ Media happens, as I was saying. We do the stream here, which I'm looking up the time as we speak. Uh, well, we've actually first do the conversation of the alt furry back in December, and then we do where we talk about QQ Media as well. Excuse me. And I interview Kelly, and QQ decides that it's better to block me because and the conversations come out where he says I'm going to DDoS his site and stuff like that. That Kelly wrote about, and you can find on Kelly's Twitter, and you can find on Kelly's Medium. Uh, what are your thoughts of the alt furry? I mean, this is after July, where you said these people are garbage. This is after the November joke. This is December 2016. What are your thoughts on QQ Media, alt furry, and that interview? If you have watched it or heard about it.
Well, I've heard some of the interview, but let's go through them one by one. Alt furry. Um, hmm. I kind of see it as the Milo of internet ideology, if you know. So it began as a joke, I guess, because I don't think John Kelly's in furry.
Well,
Correct me
John
if I'm
Kelly
wrong.
explained that the reason he created it was a containment tag to get all the degenerates who were pretending to be, fashy right wing people who are these actually these degenerate liberals to get them into one tag so that you can point and say, look, degenerates. That's the explanation he
Oh,
gave.
well, that's pretty smart. Okay, so yeah, I think that kind of backfired because now people literally take it as you can be a furry and you can be like you can hold not like traditional values. I don't think you can. I think being a furry kind of indicates that you haven't really grown up properly.
No, I mean, I think the people that
That's
believe
a
that
sad
are
fact.
degenerates and liberals, though. I don't think that anybody who's truly right wing believes that. So I don't know if it's. I'm not going to judge on whether it's backfired or not. I do know that QQ has taken it as a homosexual and as a furry and run with it.
Yeah, so in my perspective, a lot of the uh, see, right wing is such a vague label, but it's very easy to twist and turn. And that's kind of what's been happening recently. Now, you can see that with the way Milo's infiltrated it. You can kind of see, unfortunately, like, look, I really like Trump. I think he's a really genuine guy, but he's kind of undermining true conservative values in some cases. And is not the first person to do it, though. Like the Republicans themselves have done. So this is just a pattern that I see repeated in old furry, and that's why I say it backfired.
So, is it fair to say? So you see QQ leading all furry. We're going to move into the next one, and he creates QQ Media. What are your thoughts on that? After what I explained regarding the making money and the things that he said and all that malarkey.
Yeah, so I don't really see the point to another blog site, to be honest. And if it's about making money, it's gonna end up like cancer very quickly. Unfortunately, some of the things Dan has said in the interview that John Kelly highlighted, I took great issue with actually. So if that's the direction they're going to, I really strongly disagree
Well, I
with
mean, if you
the
remember
existence
back in
of
the day,
community.
QQ was the guy who was saying that he's the only one talking about ethics, and he took a lot of pride in that. But as we showed later on, these guys were planning clickbait on DDM in public, and are surprised they got caught. And they made an article saying that Star Wars is ready to introduce more diversity, and they put that on their site. So that site is not only spreading degeneracy, but it's already using clickbait. And furthermore, it seems that to me at least, QQ is using the same Sargon strategy. He's trying to become friends with all these cancerous e-celebs. Somebody that he constantly retweets and constantly is in favor of is harmful opinions. What is your thought about that relationship?
Well, we can't really ascertain whether there is something solid there, but there's definitely what I call the shark, the sharking. Because when you have a big shark, there's all these little fish that follow the shark around, trying to eat the shit that comes out of the shark, basically. And that's basically what you're seeing probably with QQ and harmful opinions.
So, what are your thoughts on harmful opinions and the whole Candid blunder?
Mm, that's a difficult one. I know some people think the entire thing is shilling, but there is some issues with the whole censorship using natural language processing, which, by the way, I don't think will work. But I'm not sure. It's dragged on quite a bit, hasn't it? Like they could have ended it there and not given it more attention than it needed.
Uh, so
So
basically, he's
there
doing
is
all that
something
cancerous
suspicious
things.
there.
Now, this is the part where I like to highlight some stuff, and I want to get your kind of thoughts because you weren't expecting this. Harmful, actually, back in 2015, he was very much one of the people who was tearing apart my article and defending Sargon of a fraud. He has this fight with Sargon now going on all of a sudden, but he was one of the people who actively tried to sabotage the whole Sargon thing. Like, for example, he liked to take pieces of my article, like a self-appointed game dev, and he liked to click that and send that to Sargon as a way of mocking, what I did. And he did it again. Uh, haven't seen behavior change to suggest they have problems. When I was talking about Gawker, they said, well, people, some big execs are stepping down. Yeah, but no, Gamergate did not cost the amount of money that people think it did. I don't think it cost anything at all to Gawker. But he's mocking that as well because that came from that. He also mocks instances which mark the beginning of Total Biscuit's fall. He's mocking anything regarding Total Biscuit, who is Total Cancer and now has Total Cancer. Um, and he's also mocking my position as an indie game developer because I put that into the article because technically I would be competition of Sargon. I don't consider that to be the case anymore because, again, Sargon isn't a game developer. He's a fraud. Uh, I put that in the article, and here's Harmful Opinions mocking that as well. And it's interesting because this is the guy who's currently fighting against Sargon because Sargon dared say that the Candid thing wasn't a big deal. Because paid promotion between YouTubers isn't a big deal. It's always been that way. And of course Sargon would say that. He's scum. Of course he wants that to go on. But here you have this guy who's actively worked to destroy that big dig that we talked about early in this conversation, that you, me, uh, and the other satellite people we've talked about worked on. Something that everybody had agreed was shit. QQ then exposes Sargon for being shit. And here you have QQ retweeting a guy and actively retweeting a guy and sucking up to the guy. And if you go to his Twitter and scroll down and start looking at everything Harmful says, I'm just posting one here, but I want everybody to go. To QQ's Twitter and check it for themselves, and it's archived, so it's not a problem. But here's this is the guy that QQ is reaching out to. He's reaching out to Harmful, and this is, of course, we've ignored the fact that he did an interview for a site that is very much involved with Vox Day, that QQ made this big deal of saying, Vox Day doesn't own the site. Yeah, but he was the beginning editor and he partially owned it, I believe. So that is his site. It isn't inaccurate to say that's his site. So QQ's been reaching out to the likes of Vox Day. He's been reaching out to the likes of liberal media. He's been reaching out and sucking up to people like Harmful Opinions to try to get in with them. People who have actively worked against things that he allegedly stood against in the past. So what are your thoughts on all this that I've kind of dumped on your lap?
Well, this is news to me, to be honest. Yeah, it's really funny to look back at that time and the positions people chose. It kind of shows what kind of people they are. And saying that he would go around trying to defend Sargon when we all know how it ended with him turning out to be a fraud. He never had a asset issue. He was using stock assets, and he basically probably spent about 5 minutes making a fake demo in Unity, and he got like $20,000 for it. Did I get that right?
£8,000, British pounds.
Or even more. So that's shit. 20,000 quid. Like holy shit. Like can't really defend that. And now that it's come back to bite him in the ass, let's suspend our belief for a second and assume that they're not somehow collaborating to create a Hegelian dialectic. In the ass when Sargon's true nature has become apparent, now he's attacking the guy. But like, dude, like, doesn't nullify the rest of the shit that you've done.
And interestingly
So,
enough, QQ
to answer your
is
question,
trying to work with this guy and trying to push this guy and promote this guy.
yeah, just don't do it. This guy is not as principled as it seems. If these tweets are to go by, like, he should at least apologize for it, in my opinion. Now that, like, put it this way, now that he's figured out that Sargon's scum, isn't he gonna go back and go through all the stuff he's done with Sargon and say, well, look, I was wrong about X, I was wrong about Y. But you're not going to see them do that because that would break character, wouldn't it? His character is more of a guy that's never wrong, the burning brain that you have to listen to.
So, and again, it's very interesting that, like, even if you can, like, I don't expect, like, harmful as shit. He's always been shit. So I don't have any respect for him. Just because he was right about Candid doesn't mean he's anything less than shit. In fact, I'm calling it now. He's going to befriend all of these e-celebs he shit on in the future. Because, again, it's what they do. They create false drama where they attack each other for a couple months. They all gain subs and followers for it. They show up on the drama channels, hopefully. And then they all become friends again. So I have, and if he doesn't, he's just using the Candid thing to make a name for himself as this really ethical individual. It's always that little word that comes back, isn't it? But the interesting thing to me is not him.
You might be right. I think you're right.
But
Because that's exactly how you generate traffic.
Of course, you create false controversy. But the interesting thing to me is not harmful. It's QQ. QQ is the guy, like, just on principle alone, I would never work with somebody who actively worked against such a big thing I was involved with. Like, I would never, like, if a Sargon cuck comes out and says, I want to work with you, unless he's changed his opinion on Sargon and what he did in the past and explains, yeah, I was wrong in the past, I wouldn't work with him. And even after doing that, he wouldn't have my trust. So, again, it's very interesting regarding QQ. What do you think about QQ deciding not to come on stream and talk these things? I mean, I understand I've wrecked QQ in the past on streams, and he's afraid of me. I understand that, but don't you think that he has at least, not even a moral obligation, but just an obligation as a man to come out here and talk about his side of the story? I mean, because to be fair, Koro is shit, but at least he pretended to offer me a counter to go to his channel. Of course, the whole idea there, as we revealed in the final deletion, was Fuzztail didn't think he could handle me, which was then proven when he came on this channel a while later. So Fuzztail wanted to host the thing with him there and help his
If you
DDM
remember,
buddy.
I offered to be, at the time I actually offered to be the moderator.
Yeah, which I was partially against for the simple fact that we don't need moderators. And at the end, since Koro caved, he demonstrated that he he didn't really believe in his conviction. He just didn't want to do it because his friends told him he was going to get wrecked. And then when he was dumped by his friends, he then made the mistake of coming here and getting executed like a man. But QQ hasn't even done that attempt. In fact, he blocked me, which is something that QQ actively speaks against. What are your thoughts? Do you think he should come here and man up and take a whooping like he should?
I definitely think he should come on. And in my experience, when you talk to people with good faith, you either go back with a lesson or you begin to understand each other a little bit better.
Fair enough.
There's no
So
point.
QQ, Ethisucks is saying come on my channel. Just wanna, maybe you should block him too.
So, so you should definitely go on. He's inviting you on, so why not?
So there you go, QQ. Find the testicular for, take your testicles out of Dan's purse and come up here. So okay, let's move a little bit forward. Let's kind of start wrapping up the DDM stuff because we have something else now. One of DDM's biggest digs. One of DDM's. Well, is there anything you'd like to add to this whole thing?
I guess you kind of forgot about one side of the cliques that are currently going on, like the Ralph stuff. Like, seriously,
go ahead, Ralph.
really, are you seriously going to defend Milo after you wrecked Sarah Neuber? Because there's no difference between the two people. Milo is a disgusting pedophile. Like, some people are not going to call him a pedophile. Like, he went to these parties where little boys were getting raped by men, and he did nothing. He's not, even now, he's not going to name names. to me, he's an accessory of a crime and should be behind bars. You don't go around defending this kind of guy. You pretty much own his crimes. You become an accessory to that crime as well. That's my comment on things.
Okay, so again, to highlight, but I don't find any of that surprising by Ralph. And it's important to point out that Ralph is allying himself with QQ and company. We talked about that in previous streams, and Kelly did a fantastic article about it. That they're trying to mock and meme because it's true. What are your thoughts on that diagram that Kelly threw up a while back? That diagram showing these people all in bed with each other. What are your thoughts about that?
I think the problem with the diagram is more the presentation than the contents, if you understand what I mean. Like, there are connections between these people, even if tentative at times, it is connected. But that's kind of how social media works. And unfortunately, over time, those connections strengthen, and then you form cliques which are permanent. And when that happens, it really turns people's opinions into rigid, continuous masses. And that's kind of what happened, especially with Paul Joseph Watson, who sort of much so many issues with what's he's saying and the values that, well, presumably he used to hold. Yeah, that's my opinion on.
So, but do you think? And I'm going to show the article on stream, just to sorry to cut you off again, but give me a second. Let me show that on stream. But do you think the connections? Do you think they're fair, regardless of what you believe of presentation? Do you think they're accurate?
Well, the connections aren't as strong as they seem, but there are connections for sure. And Paul Joseph Watson probably have a connection because you could see Ralph's article on Infowars at one point in time, as I think Kelly pointed out. The connection with DDM is a bit tentative, and I know that we'll get into that in particular now.
But keep in mind that the connection between
That's a
DDM
good
and Paul
segue.
Joseph Watson is a dotted line. It's not meant to be the
Sure.
same as QQ Media with Vox Day, that is a clear-cut
Sure.
connection,
Sure.
or QQ Media with Ralph, that is a clear-cut connection. So it is placed as
Sure.
tentative,
Sure.
and Kelly has explained that this is just part one. It's the network's going to get bigger and things are going to make more sense. But I personally think that the whole thing is pretty fair because, again, these connections are real. We can call them weak, we can call them strong, we can get into that whole hearsay and get on into that whole splitting hairs. But at the end of the day, these people are connected. They all work for the same goal. They all push each other, either directly or indirectly, either second degree or first degree. And QQ Media is now in a position where it's part of that network. It is connected to Vox Day. It is connected to Ralph. It is indirectly connected. Even if you take away the fact that Thidrin went in to that InfoWars debacle with Paul Joseph Watson, even if you take that away, they still are indirectly connected for the fact that Ralph has stated publicly how he is directly connected to Cernovich and to Paul Joseph Watson, saying that these people are the ones who he expects pretty much to retweet him and is surprised when they don't retweet him. And Ralph's connection to QQ Media is quite strong. And that leads us to a topic that I almost forgot, which was my quote-unquote docs. And that's going to be a nice segue into the next topic. Because in my quote-unquote docs, at least for me, this entire network isn't even necessary because that thing in and of itself proves the connection between them. You had people from the Ralph clique and Ralph. You had people like Male Goddess. You had people, the entirety of DDM, of course. You had people like QQ publicly. All come out and express different ideas regarding my docs. They first tried to say I was an SJW because once upon a time I said maybe feminism isn't the enemy in a video that is in my channel and that I've explained context to many times and I haven't hidden. It's there. People can see and learn from the mistakes of the past. And trying to use all these nonsense, and it all fell flat. It just showed that if they were ever good diggers, that time is far gone because they couldn't find my address, they couldn't find my phone number, they couldn't find like basic shit. And in the end, they showed my involvement with academia and the fun part about that. And we'll talk about how I'm an edtech shill because that's the next topic. Edtech is the final topic. Spoiler, boys and girls. And they exposed how I'm an edtech shill, and then they said that my dad was a diplomat and my mother was a diplomat. They were right about one of those. And yes, clearly things that they did in the 80s and the fact that they had success is clearly indicative that I'm edtech shill. Uh, and they try to deflect and they try to do, but it's very telling to me because that's how these people operate. They operate in a sense of, to them, because this is all true for them, for all of them, including Ralph. Because again, Ralph is the guy who got drunk, passed out in a hotel after getting thrown out by the person he went to see, and then assaulted the police. The majority of Black Lives Matter has not assaulted the police. Ralph has. So Ralph has something in common with the shittiest entities of Black Lives Matter. Keep that in mind. But yeah, we're going to listen to him when he talks about how he cares about cops and that kind of shit. And how, he's again, this is a guy who has a girlfriend in another country and has a very deep relationship because, again, if he has a relationship with somebody who lives with him, it's they can't stand him. But so you have all these people who all in unison try to take little old me down a peg, and all they were able to do is to prove that I'm a, and I don't want to keep repeating that because that's a very important thing, I'm an ed tech shill. The first thing I'd like to know is, what are your thoughts on that? And let's get to the elephant in the room. Kelly showed that you were in that. We kind of have to talk about that. Kelly showed that you were in that thread, talking about something in favor of the people of that thread. So get your thoughts on that, and let's get into that real quick.
All right, so I'd like to apologize for being part of that thread. It got pretty ugly. Like, I didn't really read the details when I posted what I did. I posted an image sort of mocking you. Maybe due to a misunderstanding, I thought you made the thread about me that revealed my Twitter handle. But upon reflection, it's more likely one of the participants wanted me involved.
Now, I want to stop you right there. Let's assume we've already talked about this, and you know that I didn't do that. But let's assume for a second, for sake of discussion, I did. If I revealed that you were this Twitter handle, is that equivalent to the things that they were trying to do to me in that thread, and henceforth?
Of course not. No, that's why you deserve a big apology from me, and I'm really sorry for participating.
That's okay. I mean, at the end of the day, it just showed that these people, they can't dig. I mean, if we're going to take anything away from that, it's the fact that they're incompetent. That's what I want people to really look at. I'm one guy, and they couldn't get basic shit done. And again, the purpose.
One positive thing came out of it. One positive thing came out of it. We do know now that you are the Lego master.
Yes, I am in fact the Lego master. I have mastered all of the Legos. And that to me was the favorite thing about it, because again, they tried to make a big meme out of it, trying to make it funny. But then there were people, I was just watching the thread. A lot of people think that I was in the thread. I'm not in the thread, but I was watching the thread very, very closely. And again, the whole purpose of doxing, there's 3 reasons why to dox. One, it's to shame you. Usually these people who are pseudo-anonymous have something to hide. They have something about their life that they're ashamed of. And doxing makes them go away because it shows, look, haha, you're a failure. And because this is a generation of narcissists, it's a generation of these self-indulgent assholes who think that they're the best, the moment that they get embarrassed and showed that they're failures, they don't know what to do. So that's the first purpose of doxing. The second one is to scare people and say, we're going to go after your family and we're going to send them pizzas. Because again, doxing is this huge, terrible fucking boogeyman that people are afraid of. And when those 2 things don't work, it's to try to ruin your reputation, trying to show you as a hypocrite, if nothing else. The reason why I believe I scare them so much is because they realize they can't do any of those things to me. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't care that I was being doxxed. I mean, I saw it, I think it was on Christmas Day or New Year's Day. I saw it. Somebody sent it to me and said, hey, this is happening. I'm like, okay, power to them. I mean, I have nothing to hide. And the fun part, and you can testify to this, and I did this publicly, so this isn't a behind-the-scenes thing either. I was the one to tell them what my university was so that they would find my thesis. And I had the option. This is something they don't know. I didn't go for a doctorate degree, so I didn't have to publish my thesis in a magazine. That's why it's not in a academic journal. I call it magazines, but it's academic journal. And as such, I could have written the thesis in Spanish. That's why it has a Spanish abstract on it, because you have to at least put that. And I convinced the board to let me do it in English. And I did it specifically in English so that they could find it. I've said this publicly. But again, it shows that these people have nothing on me, because I'm not, that's why I'm not anonymous. I'm not ashamed or scared of what I've done, and I understand how very little actual power these people have. So that failed incredibly, but it does bring the edtech conversation, and you and me are going to talk about edtech now. This is kind of the part of the stream that gets a little bit more debatey. It's going to be a little bit more official. It's still going to be a relatively loose format. Interruptions are going to be kept to a minimum, obviously, and I think it's going to go much quicker than anticipated. But so let's go into edtech. I guess the best introduction to do to this is, first off, we're going to leave the fact that I'm an edtech shill. We're going to leave that in the corner because I know you have something to say about that. We're going to leave that in the corner for a moment. I would like you to explain to the audience, what is edtech? First, what is edtech? Just what is edtech? Go.
Okay, so edtech is a little bit different from the educational games you've probably played in the past from Sierra and all those publishers. EdTech is really a manner of either training somebody to complete specific tasks in a certain way using an abstract representative form, influence their cognitive function in some subconscious level. Whether it is to ideas into their brain. For example, even something as simple as learning a language would be EdTech. So you're probably using EdTech right now without knowing it, but the technology can take a dark turn if it's used in the wrong way, as I will try to demonstrate in this debate.
Okay, the way I'm going to conduct this debate, because I didn't tell the people, and you've previously agreed to it, is I'm going to ask a series of questions, allow you to get all of your arguments, rather than to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I'm going to let you get all your arguments, and then we're going to kind of put my thoughts, and then we're going to have kind of a conversation afterwards, if that is even necessary. I do think that I'm gonna break that rule a little bit here, if you're okay with that, and I want to throw in a little bit of a fact here, which is that, as you know, this has been Thidrin's dig, or at least he's called it his dig. And that's the third question. I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. But the definition of what is edtech is very different from what you just exposed to what these people believe. So I'm going to show, when we get to question number 3, what these people believe edtech to be. So I'm giving you a heads up now, because I didn't warn you of that in advance. I'm not going to use it as an argument for myself. I just want to show that if you find that fair. If you have an issue with it, I won't.
Okay, show me, what do they think?
Okay, so the best way to show you what they think is, we could go to the InfoWars, obviously, stuff, which is a disaster, which Thidrin...
Actually, can we cover that point, because it's very important, actually.
Remember that the debate has three pieces, and part 3, which is what you did about it, will cover that. So let's try let's try not to get too giddy. But I'm going to take, rather than Thidrin's mess, where he pretty much just says that they're social engineering you with games, I want to take, and I'm going to actually read here the article, or at least a portion of it. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Fuck that. Straight from Ralph's site. No ad block, no archive, nothing. Straight from Ralph's site. We're going to read the collab work that was done between Ralph and them, where they guest editorialed an article on the Ralph retort. So let's look at that real quick. And it says, guest editorial by Azurain, which is Dan, and the QQ. For several years now, there's been many calls for a reform of our public education system. Articles pointing out flaws of our public schools have appeared on plenty blogs like Huffington Post and the Daily Beast. Why, Donald Trump even talked about pushing for education reform, and he's elected president. Some have suggested that this reform should involve the integration of video games in classrooms, which they call educational technology, or edtech for short. You can see in the early stages of this that some teachers having their students play Gone Home in class, causing the game to have a big boost in sales. I'm going to preface and say that's not the big reason they've had boost in sales. That's a little bit dishonest. It's not because they're playing it in public schools. That happened after. The big thing was it was pushed by the media. That is true, but that's a little bit, he's being a little facetious.
I agree with you. Yeah.
They're saying that it's because it's been playing it. No, if anything, that would take the sales down because the schools would buy it and then the kids wouldn't buy it. So that's a little facetious. The goons from Extra Credit have made several videos on the subject. Even Disney and Microsoft have shown interest in the idea. There's just one little problem with edtech. If edtech becomes financially successful, then it brings changes to the industry that will be devastating to the video games as a medium for entertainment. Now I'm going to stop there because that kind of steps on the toes of the second question, which is why is edtech cancer? But basically, QQ defines this in this little article, edtech, as pretty much any technology that's used for education is edtech. First off, do you agree with that? Yeah, that's why I brought it up, because it contradicts your definition a little bit. So explain to us why QQ's initial definition is incorrect.
So just to get this straight, was it written only by QQ or QQ and Dan?
QQ and Dan, both.
So it's possible that Dan probably got this. So let's just say Dan and QQ together. So Dan and QQ are wrong on this point, and it's on several levels. First off, you covered the fact that if it was a standard game and the school bought it, then there would be less sales. That's correct, because then the people would understand it's a shit game and they wouldn't buy it when they go home, or more accurately, they would have played it and would have no need to buy it again. So that's one point that you've covered. Second point is that's not really what educational is about. It's not just about schools, and it's not just about games. That's why it's edtech, not ed games. Edtech encompasses any sort of technological aid rather than paper and pen or some sort of static educational text or video or something. EdTech is basically the new multimedia, if you like. So the definition itself is wrong, and the conclusion that it would devastate the games industry is kind of backwards. So the cause and effect are reversed. There is a connection, but we'll get into that maybe later.
Okay. So
statement as it's written is incorrect.
So let's jump into and again, it's going to be very important because it's going to intertwine. The reason why we did all of DDM stuff because it is directly involved with Thidrin and QQ and the rest of DDM. So and the reason why I brought up my quote unquote docs thread is because they placed me as an edtech shill, and I am henceforth cancer because of it. So let's go into that second piece. Question for you: what is wrong with edtech? What is the issue? Why is it cancer? Explain that to the audience.
Okay, so edtech itself is not cancer per se.
Can I cut you off real quick? Can I cut you off real quick? Real quick.
Sure.
I'm sorry. See, Thidrin, when somebody asks you a question, you don't go if you know what you're talking about. Go ahead.
So edtech is actually has been used for a long time. We didn't refer to it as edtech. You know, in companies, when you enter, they would have a training program, and you could call that edtech. The techniques weren't really formalized with academia until maybe the mid-90s, and it's grown exponentially in recent times. There are entire companies working on edtech. Not all of it relates to in the sense of schools. A lot of it relates to workplace education, self-education. For example, you have some apps on your phone which use a lot of persuasive technology to, for example, teach you a language. And, you know, I don't see that as negative per se. So it's a technology, and technology can be used for good or it can be used for bad. Separate the technology from the purpose and who's holding it.
Okay, so is it fair to? I have two questions, follow-up questions for you in this case. Number one, does edtech work? Does it accomplish
yes.
its desired goal of teaching people through games certain things, whether it be skills for the workplace or whether it be putting ideas into people's heads, such as immigration is a good thing?
Okay, so from the papers I've read, the edtech that pertains to training works a lot better than the edtech that pertains to changing people's opinions on political matters, for example. So there's a demonstrative positive effect of edtech when it comes to training, but when it comes to cognitive behavioral modification, or for basically, in better words, brainwashing, I don't think it's yet been demonstrated as working.
Well, to be fair, it does. Yes, that is true. It isn't this 100% proven thing, but it does go into the fact that it's difficult to teach you new things, but it does reinforce pre-existing things. Like for example, um, the idea that we have to protect the weak, for example, which is a cultural thing. It is reinforced. It works all in unison. It's not this independent thing that if you play a game, you're going to become violent. If you play a game, you're going to hate women. If you play a game, you're going to fuck an Arab. No, but if it's all in conjunction, if it's all together, uh, and I know this from the people I was surrounded in and such, because again, people know I'm an edtech chill, and we're going to get into that. Uh, but it does work in unison, at least at reinforcing or it suggesting certain beliefs. Do you agree with that? Do you think that's fair?
Basically, that's basically what I was trying to say. It can't convince you of something unless you've already like absorbed it. It can only solidify your opinion on matters. It's a lot like social media. Like you go on social media and you follow accounts you already agree with, and all they do is solidify your pre-existing opinions. So I see edtech as at the moment, only furthering that.
Okay. So the second question is, so there is nothing de facto wrong with the technology and itself, or with the idea that you can suggest certain beliefs to people in a subtle way. In the same way, it's a parallel thing to how cinema used to be able to suggest certain things when it comes to the showing one frame of a hamburger, and then you now want a hamburger after you eat the after you go to the movies and watch the movie, because it had one frame that showed a hamburger and you can't see it but your mind can, and it can suggest you to do certain things. Do you think there's anything wrong in and of itself with the technology and with these uh, upcoming beliefs, I guess, that you can reinforce things, or suggest certain things? Do you think there's anything wrong with the technology in and of itself?
I think the problem is in the application, not the technology. It's the same with cinema, basically. You can use any film to twist people's beliefs. And that's basically how they've corrupted society, really. They've infested the TV channels, the radio channels, the cinemas, the internet, games now. So there's nothing wrong with games, but now they're being used to corrupt people. It's the application that we have to look at. And there are some domains as well when it pertains to edtech. There are domains I would advocate it is completely avoided or contraband
Okay.
after
So
you comment on what I said.
so what is the issue? I guess once again, what is if you can sum it up in two sentences? What is the issue? What is the problem? What should we be looking out when it says ed tech? Because again, Thidrin and company have really, really, really tried to nail home that this is all about social engineering. That the liberals are going to make you a liberal with these games, which as I semi defended it, but I've already explained what I meant by that. So to you, what is the issue? What is the issue? What exactly do we need to look at? And please don't go
The
on.
issue is
Um,
the issue is actually the combination of using edtech in a reinforced way. For example, in a school, or let's say a re-education camp. Now that sounds out there, but that's basically the issue. If you are forced to use it, and if you're forced to somehow pass a trick with it, then it becomes an issue.
Okay, so your idea is that it's wrong, or it's not wrong. The issue with it is if it's being used to push liberalism and people are forced to use it, there's a problem there. Is that fair summation of what you just said?
Not necessarily liberalism. I mean, it can be in some certain domains damaging in of itself, independent of any sort of ideology it pushes. And there's some research which I won't mention at the moment that can prove that. But the issue is actually how it's enforced and the domain it's used in. For example, I don't think edtech should be used in schools at all.
Okay. Why?
Okay, there's two main reasons. When you hand an electronics device to a child, they become overstimulated, and this can actually not aid it. When you give a child a piece of blank paper, it's not just a piece of paper, it's an infinite set of ideas that they possibly explore. When you hand a child a pre-configured program which they can go through, you're basically restricting their thoughts. Even if you're not restricting their political ideology, for example, I think it fundamentally hampers education when it comes to children per se. They have to be there. It's enforced as it's a school. So I think the system works well when it's applied properly, which it's unfortunately not, and that is quite deliberate.
You're kind of cutting out a little bit, so I didn't get that last part. Can you repeat it?
Okay, so I'll repeat. So it's in schools, it's an example where edtech would be enforced. Why I take issue with it, and the domain itself makes it harmful. Traditional education work. Well, we wouldn't be here talking if it wasn't for traditional education, but at the moment it's being undermined from the inside, and I don't think edtech adds anything to schools per se. I think it should be restricted to an adult domain.
Why?
Basically, because adults can make their own decisions unless they're in a re-education camp. Basically, you can choose to take part in an edtech program, basically to gain a skill, or if so inclined, get more indoctrinated into becoming a SJW, or maybe a priest or something. But anyway, I think children in a school don't really have a say in what they learn, and their parents today don't really have a say either.
Okay. I'm going to show a little bit of what QQ believes. Some of what he believes, I was refreshing the article there for a moment. Um, some of what QQ believes kind of is in line with what you said in the sense of, in combination with all the other things that they have to read and do, being forced to play these things will, make them become an SJW. And I'm being intentionally exaggerated here. You can read the article and explain for himself, but I want you specifically to respond to because he also has another underlying issue in this article where he says if EdTech becomes financially successful, then it will bring changes to the industry that will be devastating to video games as a medium of entertainment. While computers have been used in schools practically since their invention, beyond classes specifically for computer programming, they were mostly treated the same as playtime at recess. You could not actually get class credit for beating Star Wars Droid Walkers or Elroy Goes Berserk, for instance. Or Berserk, excuse me, for instance. But the point of EdTech is that computer games would be an integral part of the school's curriculum. One would actually be forced to play them in order to pass the classes. Now, the narrative surrounding this is that it will make school fun and happy place for children to learn. No longer will kids view learning as a tedious chore that they are forced to do day in and day out. They will finally look forward to going to school and will grow to be smarter people because of it. This is, of course, complete and utter nonsense. EdTech will be at best like boring, grind-heavy RPG Maker games with enemies replaced with exam questions at worst. At worst, social justice propaganda to make children hate themselves because they are white, or teach them that white people are responsible for their life problems. Alone, those would be just terrible video games, of which we already have an abundance of, but combined with the school system, it would bring the gaming industry to far worse than we've ever seen before. Now, before we go forward, this is the game that QQ links as a terrible RPG Maker game, which is a game called Learn Japanese to Survive Higata Battle. This game has an overwhelmingly positive uh, review standing in recent when this archive was made, and very positive overall. And if you look at the people who reviewed the game, 13 hours, 6 hours, 11 hours, 7 hours, 3 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, don't count, 3.8, 0.6, 10 hours, 6 hours, 9 hours, 1, 1, 6. Like these look, it looks like people genuinely liked it, and QQ is linking this as a terrible RPG Maker game. So uh, we'll talk about that portion in a bit because that just shows QQ's an idiot. But let's talk about the general theme of what he's saying here. What were your thoughts of the 3 paragraphs I read?
There's a lot of issues of what he's saying. Basically, what they're saying, to be specific. Um, it doesn't necessarily follow that if you have edtech, it would necessarily involve games. Like that's an idea some people have, but it's not necessarily how things will happen. Um, it also doesn't necessarily follow that the game industry will suddenly switch to edtech. They've got it backwards basically. If the game industry can no longer make profits on games, then the same studios that were purposed for video game production would naturally switch over to creating educational technology. Would you disagree with that?
Yeah, I think that the idea that QQ is I get where you're coming from, but first I want to disagree completely with what QQ is saying that it will bring changes to the industry, it'll be devastating to video games. Well, the key there that he just said is financially successful. It's been demonstrated time and time again that if something is subsidized by the government, it's not necessarily financially successful. In fact, things are at their best when the government isn't the one funding them. So if it becomes financially successful to begin with, it has to be successful outside of government intervention. It has to be a big deal. It has to be something that people like and people enjoy. If that happens, if that is what they're talking about, it wouldn't be a terrible quote unquote change for the video game industry. It'd be supply and demand working. It would be people love this kind of shit, let's make more. The idea that there would spring up many, many more independent studios or small studios that would want to get government funding in order to make games is simply false, for the simple fact that if you look at edtechs and video games in particular, because as you correctly stated, edtech is not just video games, as the internet company has tried to make you believe. Many of these companies, and I've been contacted by a couple of them, and actually to do work for them, they're independent and they're funded either by venture capitalists or they're funded on their own, their own ways. So this idea, and they're not making it to get government funding. They're doing it on their own, vocation. So this whole idea that the government is the one creating edtech is first off, it's facetious for the fact that a lot of the funding of this comes from venture capitalists and private investors. So it's not this government is, funding this into existence. It's going into existence because there is a demand for it, an organic, real demand. The second thing is this idea that because, these video games are coming, first off, they're shit. QQ's own example shows they're not shit. It shows that the game in particular QQ uses as an example as a quote-unquote shit RPG Maker game. It has incredibly high reviews. And these aren't reviews of people who played 20 minutes. These are reviews of people who played 10 hours, 11 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, 9 hours that liked this game. So again, QQ has the right to not play them and to dislike them. But this meme of bad RPG Maker games, it's nonsensical for the simple fact that, and I like that he left this out, but Stedrin's favorite example was Undertale. Undertale was a good game. We can spin and talk about how we don't like the message it's putting out, and I would agree, but it was a legitimately good game. If you look at it purely as a game developer, if you look at it as a consumer, it was a good game. So this idea that it's all shit and it's being funded by the government and it's going to be pushed down our kids' throats, I think that's completely facetious. And I think it's indication of somebody who has no experience in that industry, who doesn't know what's going on. And again, I'm an edtech shill, so I know what the fuck I'm talking about. I mean, they claim that. They pushed that meme. Now they have to eat it. I'm the only one out of all these people who's qualified to talk about it because I'm the only one who's put his name out there, and I'm the only one you can actually look and see, oh, he has been working here. So, again, by their own, with their own evidence, they were shown to be shit. They were shown to not know what the fuck they're talking about. Now, to kind of bring it to what you were talking about and to answer your question a little bit better, the idea you cannot hold the premise that video games cannot influence people, which was the entire meme against Anita Sarkeesian, because she presented her thesis incorrectly, obviously, because she also doesn't know what the fuck she's talking about. But you cannot hold this idea that video games cannot influence people and at the same time be playing Boogeyman Maker as these guys are in this, which isn't you, and I hope people aren't equating their argument to yours. You can't hold that position and at the same time say, well, these games are going to make you a liberal, and at the same time all games are going to turn into this, because quite frankly, video games is the most profitable entertainment industry in the world, and I haven't seen less Call of Duties coming out because this is being used. So the argument of two bullet points. The argument of, number one, video games are going to be affected by this and you're going to have less games and it's going to be terrible because everyone's going to go to this. False. It's going to create a bigger video game industry is what we're seeing currently. The government isn't the one artificially creating it. We can talk about, which is what we're going to talk about mostly here, which is its application, its forceful application into schools, which we clearly hold different views on, but we'll get into that when it's my turn, I guess. So that's nonsense. And the second point of the video game industry is going to collapse because of it. It's nonsensical for all the reasons I already explained. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mostly agree. I do think that there is evidence that certain governments are funding research into this matter.
Oh, they are?
Yeah,
No, to cut you off, they are. They are
yes.
funding it. I absolutely agree that they are funding it. But to think that this is a government-created thing is false, because the majority of the funding is coming from venture capitalists and private entities. It's not in any country in the world. If you go to Europe, which is the most deadly example, because Think Serious takes place on videos that are pretty much all around Europe, is what they're showing in Think Serious. In Europe, the majority of the investment in edtech comes from venture capitalists and private investors, and Europe is pretty much commie at this point. So if that's true in Europe, where you're going to get the most amount of government funding in education and things like that than anywhere else in the world, if that's true in Europe, then the meme that the government is the main funder of this and it wouldn't exist if it weren't for the government and is an artificial thing is false. It's been in the works for decades and it wasn't created by the government. It's had legitimate interest and the market has evolved into that direction, is what I argue. I'm sorry for cutting you
Of
off. Go
course,
ahead.
but it's fine. It's fine. Of course, here's the thing: when you create a useful tool, there's naturally going to be people who want to appropriate it and use it for their
Correct.
own purposes.
Yes.
That doesn't, for example, if somebody says gunpowder is evil because the government can use it to execute you, yeah, sure. If they can use it to execute you, they can also defend your country with it. So it's not necessarily the tool that it's at fault. The thing that Think Serious is to make people more informed about edtech and to resist what Fadrin was pushing in the debate, which is government funding of education. I think those two cannot be mixed. I think government should not be involved in funding education or entertainment for that matter. I think that should be left to the private sector, or you get cancer, basically. Would you agree with me?
I couldn't agree with you more. But that would make that would make the argument not about edtech. That would just make the argument about we should just make sure governments don't fund education, period. So wouldn't that just defeat the whole purpose? And rather than just thinking serious and making fools out of ourselves in InfoWars, wouldn't it just be easier to say, hey, let's not fund education, period? That kind of, if the fear, and I've stated multiple times that I don't think the government funding of edtech is what's driving edtech to begin with. It's venture capitalists and private entities. But if people disagree with me and they say, no, it's the government that's keeping it alive, then the argument should be let's just defund education entirely, which has worked in many different countries. I've given examples of it. I've never gone to, after I left the United States, I've never gone to public school. I've always gone to a private school. And it was affordable in the Dominican Republic. We can do that. We can have education not be handled by the government from an economic perspective. And I would go even further, but let's just keep it economic for the time being. And that would solve the problem. So why would we even be talking about edtech to begin with? It seems like a boogeyman meant to make Fidrin popular.
No, I mean there was a lot of people involved digging into it well before Thydrin
This would be the
got
perfect
done.
moment for you to talk about two things. Well, actually, before you go into that, there's an important question because there's something people don't understand, and I believe you have the qualifications to talk about it. And this goes back to me being an edtech shill. One of the reasons I'm an edtech shill, and I'm coming for your children with Legos, and I'm going to build a better future for them,
Piece by
it
piece.
is because one of the tags, one of the keywords in my thesis was gamification, and QQ takes that as a big circle and puts it out, and this is it's terrible because I've seen this a lot from the Thidrin camp where they conflate edtech and gamifications. They're related, but they're not the same thing. So can you please first off explain what is gamification?
Cool. So gamification is anything that turns a standard task into something where you can gain some virtual achievement. For example, a very popular gamification tool is Twitter, where you can get retweets, you can get likes, you can get follows, or Reddit, where you can get useless upvotes and things like that. Anything that involves some sort of score is generally referred to as a gamified
I
scenario.
wasn't expecting you to use
It's
Twitter. That's a fantastic example, but I'm gonna be even dumber. I'm gonna go gamification on Google right now. I'm gonna read what the gamification is defined as by Google. Uh, Mastering gamification, whatever. Shit, I'm getting a lot of crap in Spanish. Where's the option? Use Google.com. Fuck it. What's gamification? What is gamification? Gamification is the concept of applying game mechanics and game design techniques to engage and motivate people to achieve their goals, which is pretty much what you just said. But I love what you just said because it opens these people's eyes into gamification of itself is not, and again, you already blew them out of the water when it comes to what is edtech because they define edtech as just education with video games. They forget that it's technology in general. But going by their own assumption, they think that gamification is the driving force. It's the key thing inside of ed tech, and it's simply not true. It's an important feature, obviously, but it's much broader than it. So you're not an ed tech shill just because you've worked in gamification. Uh, Heck, shit, if you indulge in Twitter, you're indulging in gamification because you're saying this works and you're promoting it. So by using Twitter, you're telling people you should fund gamification more because clearly it fucking works. So again, but again, I'm an edtech shill. I understand these things because I've seen them from the inside. These people are Taco Bell managers and furries. So that's important. Uh, that's a great example.
for the record, for the record, I don't think Varlo is an ethics show.
Well,
He's
that's just
been.
bluffing.
Am I allowed to mention? Well, am I allowed to mention the relevant private conversations we've had?
Sure.
Do I have your permission?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so Varlo has mentioned his university work to me, and that was when he already knew that I was involved, at least in some way, with Think Serious.
Well, yeah, that's
Like,
true.
chill. He
Furthermore,
preferred to
you're not
keep it
breaking any
hidden.
ground here because I've said this publicly. I even said my university publicly in Androdol streams and in streams of my own and streams of John Kelly. So it's not a secret. And I like that you bring up when I knew that you guys were doing Think Serious because wouldn't that make me an authority on the topic?
Yeah,
Yeah. And
wish you were involved actually.
yeah, I was involved in wait, what, in Think Serious? I didn't.
At least in discussions that
Oh
led
yeah.
up to.
Yeah, I mean, I knew what they were talking about, and I think they were wrong, and I was trying to help. But Thidrin, well, to be fair, I mean, who are you going to listen to? Me, a guy with 2 master's degrees, who's been who's been in academia, who is been in game development for better part of 3 years now, who's done all these circuits, who's done all these things, or a guy who's having trouble memorizing the Taco Bell menu. I'd listen to the Taco Bell guy personally. That's just me. But okay, carry on
Yeah,
with the
obviously.
point. So I want to get unless there's something you want to add and you can do that. I want to get to what did you and yours do about it, and I want you to talk about Think Serious, and I want you to talk about this entire thing because it kind of looks like a debacle from my perspective. But let's talk about that. Unless there's something you'd like to add, go ahead.
No, let's move on to the point you want me to address. So let's cover what went wrong with Think Serious. So by the time it was very much complete, I wasn't involved in it. I was involved basically when all of the videos were produced, and unfortunately, the video maker was burnt out, and he didn't leave any hyperlinks to the points he was trying to make in the videos. So we had a whole bunch of videos without hyperlinks,
Can I ask you two
and we had to
questions?
go back. Sure.
Number one, you're saying the video producer. Are you suggesting that Sifidrin did not make the videos?
Thidrin had zero involvement in the production of the videos
Number two,
themselves.
the digging that was involved. Were there multiple diggers? Was it Thidrin who did the digging? Uh, whatever you're allowed to say, put that out.
Okay, I'll say this because people deserve to know. Most of the digging actually happened on HM by anonymous diggers, not by any secret underground digging team. Um, the rest of it was done on IRC, and the way it was packaged was done by the individual video maker, though.
Okay. So basically, Thidrin has a series of videos on his channel, and he's gone on to Infowars, and he's pretty much been associated as the Think Serious guy. And what I'm gathering here is that at best he did 20% of the work.
You're being a bit generous there, but yeah, okay, let's go with that.
So basically, Thidrin has taken advantage of anonymous diggers, taken advantage of anonymous video producer, and he's engranded himself as the Think Serious guy. That's what he is. He's the Think Serious guy who's gone on Alex Jones' channel, radio, whatever, and pretty much become a minor e-celeb off of other people's work. Okay, carry on.
Well, I don't know if I'd go as far as say he took advantage of the producer, mainly because the person who supposedly worked on edtech came on HN and said he didn't see it that way. But you know, that could easily be a fake anonymous
But again,
person.
the way we could push this is give me one good reason why it wasn't uploaded to an anonymous channel and instead it was uploaded to Thidrin's channel.
Yeah, there's no good reason, to be honest.
So the only real reason is to boost Thidrin.
Perhaps.
Okay, carry on.
Okay, so the reason why Think Serious failed is twofold. The video production itself was very amateurish. It was a mishmash of slides, and you know they had the right idea in the first video and the last video. There's some videos in there which are great, but they could be numbered on one hand basically, and the rest of it, you know, you'd have to have a bit of autism to sit through it and then go through the links. Generally, when you want to make a documentary, it has to have a good structure. It has to have the thesis at the beginning, and then you demonstrate it with point after point. You don't lay out some networking graph and then at the end come up with a conclusion. That's the failure at the start, which is why it needed some sort of good interview to sort of piece it together and explain it. And that brings us to the second part of where it failed. Now, at Great Trust, there were some people on Twitter with connections to Infowars who were willing to lend Gamergate an ear, basically, and bring someone who could explain this, what everybody was saying was an issue, onto Alex Jones.
Question: did they meet Paul Joseph Watson when he was looking at the gay scene in Prague, or no? To your knowledge.
I think this is before Paul Joseph Watson's transformation into the very sorry state he is at the moment. The disgusting.
I think he was always a sodomite, but okay, go ahead.
Maybe, but he's just a disgusting hypocrite at the moment. But anyway, so back then he was genuinely trying to do journalism. At the start, he was looking for people to speak to about Gamergate, and a lot of people were pushing back and saying, "More PR, don't go on Infowars, don't go on Infowars." And I believe they stopped King of Cool from going on at one point in time. Um, Maybe I'm mixing channels up, but something like that. And yeah, so great trust. Fadrin went on to Infowars, and I don't know if you have the clip of it. I believe you've played it on this channel, and the chat is actually demanding that you play the clip. If you check,
Yeah, that's been
would
there
you
for
like
a
to share
while.
them?
There's a lot of clips to play if we're going to be honest. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to. But keep talking. I'll play something at least. I'll play a piece
All
of
right,
it.
cool, cool. Throw him a bone at least. So, yeah, all I can say is it was an utter embarrassment at that point. Fydron really screwed the pooch with that interview. It was some people on Infowars were calling it the worst interview in Infowars history, I think. And yeah, at that point in time, Think Serious was dead. The effort was gone.
Okay.
That's why it failed.
Tell me, what was the purpose? Why was Think Serious? We know what it failed and you know what it was, but why? What was it trying to achieve? What was the point?
As I understand and as I advocated as well, the point was to inform adults about this new technology, which they probably aren't familiar with, before the lobbyists from private equity and you know huge companies could influence the government into funding it. Like for example, that was the main purpose.
Okay, so informing people was the purpose, right? Is that accurate? Informing
Precisely.
adults. Okay. I'm gonna play a couple clips because why not? We can pick this shit up, and then I'm gonna, unless there's something you would like to add, I'm gonna go into my opinions. So let's start
Yeah, okay, let's
with
do it.
minute 6. This is linked in my uh, video, "How the Internet Works: A Tale of Clicks and Cliques," or "Cliques and Clicks," excuse me. Let's put that in there. Here we go. Let's share screen and let's get our Thidrin on. Let's get the man, also known as Theodore Morgan Major, the myth, the legend, the guy who will in fact, uh, you know, get you the best choice at Taco Bell. Um, let's see what he has to say. Let's see what this academic mastermind, this guy who knows all about edtech for some reason, because he's talked, maybe he's talked to some of those people in Taco Bell, Burger King. I heard that he's worked through the fast food chains and he's really done things. So let's play a couple of clips. Let's play minute 6. Here we go. Get ready to fuck. I've watched this more times than anybody should have ever seen this shit. But let's do it again. Here we go.
Consumer demand and entertainment, and they've turned it into this basically a platform for re-education, and that's insidious. That's North Korea like. We shouldn't have people with political agendas involved in entertainment. If it's completely open source and they admittedly display that to the full public view, then that's fine. But when they're doing it behind the scenes, when they're hiding it behind this supposedly neutral platform, then it becomes a major problem, and we need to talk about it. So Theodore Morgan Major, just describe how they're using video games for political re-engineering. What messages are they putting within these video games to push their political agenda, and why should we be concerned about that?
Specifically, they are citing their own work. They are pushing together into groups. Damn it.
Oh, God damn
They have been engaged in cytogenesis, which is basically citing each other's work, which ends up eventually getting fed to Wikipedia, as people end up knowing how Wikipedia works. It ends up taking citations from supposedly credible sources. Anyways, what they've been building up their cases from there to get government money to produce papers to give them more authority. They've been producing lackluster games and getting government money for that. And a notable example for that one would be what led up to a game called Depression Quest that was created
And that
by
was Zoe Quinn, right? That was the
by
same
Zoe
woman that
Quinn.
got in front of the UN and basically said that calling someone via their pre-transition name a transgender person is the equivalent of a hate.
I hate Paul Joseph Watson's guts, but it's so obvious here that he's trying to. I don't like him, but he is doing his best to salvage this shit. He hears Zoe Quinn say, "Okay, talk." This entire interview is about getting Thidrin to talk as little as possible. Cryogenesis. Oh no, was it? What was that? What was he said? Oh Jesus Christ! Oh. I can't. I've watched this more times. I don't think I can play anything else. And I see somebody went in the chat and posted European descent. I don't know why you hate Europeans, bro. That's all I have to say. I think you've been engaged a little bit too much in diversity. Ooh, that was terrible. Okay, so I can't keep playing that. Plus, I think the stream is lagging like fucking hell. I can't hear you.
You might know.
I can't hear you. Can you say that again?
The laughter might.
Whoa! It seems the stream stopped all of a sudden. Can you hear me? Okay, it seems we're back. Seems that we had a little bit of a technical issue there. Oh, we're still down again. Holy shit. Give me a sec. Okay, it seems we're back. Are you there, Ethisucks?
I'm still here.
Okay. We were having some issues there, technical difficulties. Probably being DDoSed or something, who knows? Joke. But, okay, so, Jesus Christ. I'm not going to listen to that again, regardless of whatever. I'm not going to listen to that shit again. If you want to listen to that cringe fest, you can go to the other video. But, yeah, okay, making sure that everybody can hear me. If you can hear me, please say, type F to pay your respects in the chat, and I can know that everything's going well. If you can listen to it for me, please do that. Ethisucks.
I can actually see it running live. It's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's interesting how whenever Thidrin comes up, and his colossal failure comes up, shit goes to hell. But again, we've already played it, so it doesn't matter if you guys couldn't hear it. So let's go to my argument on this whole thing. Here's my opinion. I'm obviously not gonna disagree with your definition of edtech. I'm not gonna disagree with any of that relevant stuff. I'm going to point. Well, first, I'm obviously going to point to Thidrin's definition, which is in that 6-minute mark. Why is it important? Why is it a problem? Why should we care about edtech? And he just says, well, because they're citing each other. Ooh. No, that just shows that this guy's just fucking Taco Bell employee that doesn't know what he's talking about. Now, here's my issue with this whole thing. The way I see it, and in my experience, it works. It does help reinforce messages. It also depends on the surrounding environment. I mean, you can't, and it also depends what message you're trying to suggest. If it's something like go kill everybody, that doesn't work for obvious reasons, because people and children can tell between cartoon violence and real world violence, for example. But when it comes to sending a message, when it comes to normalizing a certain thing, a certain idea, a certain belief, it does have some degree of success. It does have some degree of success. And the reality is that if the game is good, if people enjoy the game, people are more likely to stick to the message. And if they're more likely to stick with the message, they're more likely to apply that in their real life or to reflect about or whatever. That's tried and true. That's something that movies have gotten, series have gotten. I mean, if you think of your favorite series and think about the themes in it, think about the more emotional moments or the more powerful moments, think about those ideas that series suggests, and you will find yourself at the very least reflecting on it in real life. And if you're a child, it marks you even more. My entire position has been there's only two possible scenarios. Either edtech works or it doesn't. And when I say it works, I mean it works to its entirety. That it in fact can suggest, social justice propaganda to people as QQ suggested. In either one of them, if you care about funding, you should go after government funding in general. We should minimize government funding as much as possible. But even then, I think that's a mistake. Let's work first off of the assumption that it is something that matters, it is something that can put, and we're also, there's an entire aspect that I know you care about that we haven't talked about, which is the aspect of it could make people into celebrities who are undeserving, or it could make people influential who are not deserving, if you let the government be the arbiter of this. My entire argument is this: if it works, let's work off of the assumption that it works, and you can turn people into SJWs with it, and you can suggest social justice propaganda to an extent. My suggestion would be that if you look at what you guys did, and I'm including you in that based off of what you said, not into the entirety of the argument, just think serious. And I'm going to be using you liberally, so it doesn't necessarily mean you, it could mean all of them. But what these people have done, what DDM has done, think serious, going on Ethan Ralph and writing the barrage of nonsense that QQ and Dan wrote, going on InfoWars and talking about cytogenesis. All of this does not work towards a functional goal. In fact, the goal itself, to educate people, it's a failed strategy. It doesn't work. When you want to educate people on something, when you want to inform people of something, unless it's a very specific, easy to define thing, like an individual, like, for example, Anita Sarkeesian or Milo, if it's something this general in which you have to combat the argument of, okay, it's not all of it, it's just a piece of it, and the technology itself isn't wrong. When you have to go through all of these hoops, which is why I believe Thidrin and company have simplified it and said, edtech is just video games trying to make your children into SJWs, which is not. That's facetious. To try to simplify it. When you're trying to go with this big complicated idea of, well, it's not the technique that's a problem, but the technique works. It's what exactly they're selling it, how they're selling it, and they're forcing you to. And when you go into all this, it's very difficult to educate anybody. And in fact, what the entire Think Serious thing shows me, I think the highest viewed video is 1.7K. I've beaten that on my own with the Angry Joe stuff, which Thidrin can have no claim on. I've beaten that on my own with the SJW Gamer, which is purely entertainment. So if you look at it from that perspective, not only was it a colossal failure from the beginning, but I think that the goal itself is a mistake. This idea of let's educate people about this very specific thing, no one's going to give a shit. And that's why they were forced to take this incorrect view of what edtech is, because they need to turn it into a boogeyman, because they understand that when you have a boogeyman that people can fight, it becomes easier to recruit individuals. And Thidrin wanted to be on the top of this pyramid. What I believe we should do, and it comes down to not just what we're fighting, but how to fight it. If I'm going to go off of and take their assumption and say, okay, this is a problem in education, which is an argument that you made, that it's an issue to force it in education. I disagree. If it works, I don't think the problem is the technique. I think the problem is what exactly it's pushing and how it's pushing it. And we wouldn't be having this conversation if we had a government that legitimately care about its citizens. If it's a government that legitimately cares about its citizens, I don't care if it's funding education, because it by default cares about its citizens, so it's going to do the right thing. We don't have that. That's why we're even having this argument to begin with. But if we're going to go off of the premise that these video games influence people into having certain beliefs in conjunction with culture or whatever, we should use that tool. We shouldn't reject it. We shouldn't throw it away. We should use that tool. And here's why. And here's how you would do it, by the way. First off, if you analyze everything they did, it failed colossally. It did no damage. It never was going to do any damage. In fact, all it did was create funny memes about Thidrin being a cuck. QQ mentions extra credits, for example. Extra credits was the keynote speaker in the Global Game Jam 2016. They were the keynote speaker of the last Global Game Jam, which is it 2016 or 2017? I think it's 2017, excuse me. But the latest Global Game Jam, which is the biggest game jam event in the world that happens simultaneously in multiple different places in each big influential country. It happens in a bunch of places in Germany. Here in Spain, there was like 4 or 5 different places where it was happening. Extra credit, which is the guys that have pushed for this, were the keynote speakers. So the damage that Thidrin and DDM can do with their way of trying to do things is minimum to none. In fact, they can't really do anything. All they can actually achieve, and here's the problem with this plan, is to create an ESA-lab. That is what this plan ultimately yields, an ESA-lab. Because how do you influence people? You need somebody who's influential. This whole thing creates an ESA-lab. And to me, that's why it was on Thidrin's channel. That's why Thidrin was going everywhere talking. That's why he was in InfoWars. That's why QQ is trying to use it now. And that doesn't work. So what I would say is we embrace the technology. Let's embrace the fact that it can influence people, and let's spin it on themselves. We spin it on themselves. If games can truly influence people, which I believe, if games can truly influence people, let's make games whose subtle messages are in our best interest. Let's make a game, for example, let's make a space game, which I've done in the past. Let's make a space game, for example, in which you control 3 factions, one of them being the Pirates, the other one being the Republic or the Empire, the Federation, whatever you want to call it, and the other one being the Guild. The Guild, in this little universe, basically what you have is a universe where there no longer is any wars, there's no longer any individual countries or planets. They're all part of this big mass called the Republic. And the Republic and all of its economic stuff, they ration things to everybody because there's no longer any competition. It's very Star Trekky, excuse me. There's no longer any competition. Everybody just works for their own betterment. And all the goods are rationed by this guild of merchants. Don't laugh. This guild of merchants who pretty much ration things for everybody throughout space. And they're the ones who handle that economic thing. And the pirates are pretty much people who haven't accepted this idea of we are this one big blur or blob, and these people are mad because of the individuality of their planets has been lost, and they hate this idea that you have to just take what's rationed and that they can't, build their own things and their own wonderful things, and that they can't become these leaders. So they're hijacking these merchants from the guild, and they're taking shit from them. And this entire game, you make it very gray, excuse me. The Republic is this big thing where everybody gets everything and everyone's happy and no longer any war or hunger or medicine. But it's so big that it's difficult to get the rations everywhere. And it's forced. You can't move out of this big Republic. The Guild, which are these merchants who give rations and food to all over the galaxy and all over the universe, they live in wealth themselves and they have ulterior motives. And these pirates, or these scum who are just greedy motherfuckers, actually have people in them who are proud of their ideals and proud of their beliefs and proud of their individual planets and are mad that that's been lost. So you give them all these grayish ideas. The bad guys aren't bad necessarily; they're kind of goodish. And you push that message, which I've heard you laughing. I don't know what message in particular you believe it is. Stop it! Don't talk about space Jews. But you do that, and you create a game, and you create a product that does that pushes this idea. Now, what do you do? What is the plan? Well, let me lay out what you do. You create this game, and then you start running these smaller circuits, these competitions, these game jam circuits, and where you take this game and you make it and you push it in those places. A big example of how this could practically work in the real world is in March you can have what's called the Resist Jam. The Resist Jam is a jam which is pretty much a jam against neo-Nazis and fascism and Donald Trump. So you go to that place and you make a game like I just described, and it's going to get coverage. It's going to blow up. It's going to be something that's going to be rejected. It's going to make them mad, and it's online. So you could absolutely participate in this. And when people look at it, the powers that be that will be there will look at it and say, this is terrible. This is pushing the wrong message. And if they don't, somebody else will see it. And this is where your YouTubers, this is where your YouTubers and your bloggers and your people on Twitter come in. This is where all those people come in, and everybody kind of has a role. And now, rather than just I'm going to inform people, you're going to beat them at their own game, because something that I've heard a lot coming from the mouth of Thidrin and coming from the mouth of QQ and coming from the mouth of all these idiots is that these games are terrible. Well, if they're so terrible, if they're a joke, grab twine and do better. You can do better. I mean, the bar is pretty low, so we can do better. And you can go to these places and intentionally provoke this reaction, and you can get shit done, and that will slowly evolve, and you can do it, and that will inspire other people to do the same thing as you. But to keep it realistic, to keep it in your own contained thing, you do that, and you create chaos, and you create these instances in which you're just a game developer who's making a game, pushing a message you believe, and that'll create, the media will pick it up, that will create this little shitstorm. Well, it'll start out small, of course, but you amplify it with these other people. And again, with 10 people, you can amplify it. Then you go and you do things like, let's say you release it on Android Store. You do it for mobile. You release it on Android Store. You pay the $25, $30 it costs to become a developer. Then each of those, let's say 10 people, creates 10 Gmail accounts and gives it 5 stars. And now that game all of a sudden has 100 downloads, is in that 101 to 1,000 bracket, and has 100 votes of 5 stars. Someone's going to pick it up, and then again you have the YouTubers, the smaller guys, start passing it around and talking about it, and you're taking their tool and you're using it against them. You're going inside their own shit and using it against them. Now, here's the issue with my plan. My plan requires 3 things, 3 big bullet points. Number 1, it requires people with talent, actual talent, not people who can sit on YouTube and read scripts and say stupid shit that they then don't even believe, like QQ. Not people who are talented in Taco Bell. I mean people with actual conceivable talent. Okay? You can have the lesser people, the YouTubers, which are bottom tier. The whole Think Serious plan, it seems to have the idea and the aim to create an e-celeb. The ultimate victory you can have there is to create an e-celeb in the form of Thidrin, who can then talk about this, and it can gain influence. There's no other way this plan can get to its intended goal without doing that. And even by doing that, it wouldn't get to its intended goal. But in this plan, the intention is to create a good game, a good palpable product in which you can point and say, these pieces of shit who are making these terrible games, without looking like a hypocrite, because you have something better. And rather than trying to tear everything down, which doesn't work, you say, here's something better, and we're using edtech. It's putting out a message. I mean, you don't have an issue with games with messages, right? I mean, you've been saying that the whole time. You've been saying that games are artwork. Here's one. And then you force them into position of, well, that's the wrong message. And then their agenda of liberalism and pushing cancer comes out. Hatred did this to an extent. They weren't pushing a real message. They only milked it for money. But look how it worked with them. A shitty game, a piece of shit game, was able to create all this controversy and make a shit ton of money. Imagine if it was a good game now. Imagine if it was a game that was thrown out of a Resist Jam. Imagine the amount of publicity you would get through that. But again, to have this work, you need people with talent, people who can make games, people who've moved around this game jam world, who's seen all of these things. The second thing you would need is you would need structure. Here's another issue I have. I have an issue with quasi-anonymity. The reality is that these movements, that these operations, they cannot work when everybody's anonymous. It can't work, it will not work, and it never has worked. You need people. When you build something, when you build a movement, when you build a group of people with an objective, there has to be a structure. There has to be clear leaders, and there have to be under them a staff of people. You can call them generals, you can call them whatever they want. And then when you have that core of people, then you start recruiting the public. The issue is that those people I just pointed to, they cannot be anonymous. Here's why. TRS. You have people like Mike Enoch, who was fucking everybody. Why? Because he's anonymous. You don't know what these people truly believe. You need people to put into this structure that you know exactly what they want, you know who they are, and you know what they're doing. These people need to actually believe in what they're doing. And this big boogeyman that if you get doxxed, your life is over. It's normally not true. There's some people that do legitimately fear dox. I understand that. But look at me. Nothing happened to me. Nothing happened to Kelly. We're still alive and kicking. Nothing went wrong. And if you even look at our enemies, people like JJ Tox, people like, what's the other, Fuzztail, people like, I think Craig was also doxxed. There's a bunch of people who were doxxed. They're not dead. They're still around. Sargon was doxxed. Nothing happened. Doxxing is this boogeyman that is there to make sure that we all stay anonymous, that we all don't know each other. And that's where point 3 comes. You and Thidrin once told me a long time ago, both in separate and, I believe, at one point together, that the most valuable currency on the internet is trust. Do you remember that?
Yep.
I disagree. The most valuable currency on the internet is not trust. The most valuable currency on the internet is purpose. Purpose is what binds people together. It's what makes people who would otherwise hate each other look a blind eye and work together. It's what gets people like it's what gets groups like 4chan and Reddit to work together. It's what gets people like a fucking DDM and everybody who isn't a degenerate to have worked together in the past and to close a blind eye. Purpose, clear, defined, no bullshit, absolute purpose is absolutely necessary. And in this case, the purpose is anti-degeneracy, anti-liberalism, anti-bullshit. It's very, very clear. We don't like degenerates. And the people in the second point, the structure that I told you, have to embody this. This is why Gamergate was taken advantage time and time again. There were this blob, and they said, we have no leaders, but that is impossible. You always have leaders. You always seek out structure. Maybe it's not at the beginning, but it's going to happen eventually. And we didn't know who these people were. And we also didn't have a defined purpose anymore. They took our purpose. That was gone, and it became ethics and games journalism on one side, it became anti-SJW on another, it became the skeptic community on another. No, you need a clear, defined purpose, and the people who are on top with a clear hierarchy, well-defined hierarchy, leaders, generals, you need them there. Internet generals. You see, Thidrin? I can make the internet generals happen too. I can meme that into reality as well. You need these people there, and you need them to embody the purpose. You need them to be people who can't hide, because the reality here is I have not seen a pseudo-anon yet. I have not seen a pseudo-anonymous person who's afraid of having his identity put out there who isn't fucking hiding something. I haven't seen it yet. And the reality is that QQ will not tell you who the fuck he is, because in reality, he's one of these liberals who's allowing his ass to get fucked by other men. That's why people like fucking Fuzztail are terrified of telling you exactly who they are, because they are failures. All of these people, without a doubt, are fucking failures. Okay, the one exception could be Thidrin, who is proud of being a failure, but that's why he would be ignored, because he is a failure, and he is a liberal, and he is a bisexual, and he is all of these things. So that is my main disagreement. I don't think, even considering everything you said, that edtech is an issue, because what we should do is that if all of these things are true, we should take it, we should embody it. And the thing is, the stage is set. Every game, I've been in this for 2 years, going to game jams and meeting people and going to Gamescom and doing this and doing that. And every single time I go to one of these things, you get special perks and special results if you have a game that pushes ideas. They never say liberal ideas, because they can't. They say a game that pushes a message. Well, we'll give them exactly what they want and force them to remove us, because when that fucking shit happens, that injustice happens, all these fucking free rights people, free speech people, won't have a choice but to talk about it. And if they don't, they'll be burying their own grave. Hey, I thought you cared about video games. Look, here's this guy who isn't an SJW, he's getting taken out. And they will be forced to talk. And again, they will talk because they're leeches. That's all they do. They talk about other people. They talk. They don't make anything. So that's why I believe the plan I just exposed right here, 5 minutes, giving it structure. It can change. It doesn't have to be that exact thing. That's why I think that is more valuable than anything serious. And of course, the reason why people like Thidrin won't like it is because people like Thidrin and QQ and company would automatically be eliminated, because they are degenerates who push for degeneracy. When you start giving leniency, when you give unclear rules and unclear purposes and unclear objectives, that's what happened. And that is why Think Serious has failed. It's why it will always fail, because the reality is they don't give a shit about edtech, because they don't understand it. Out of all the people involved in this whole thing, I am the only one that the public can look at and say, yeah, he knows what edtech is, because these stupid idiots proved it. They proved it. They showed that I've been involved in that world. I know exactly what it is. They don't. And the proof of the matter is that when they write their little articles, when they go on to their radio shows, when they do their little stupid videos that they don't even make, they fail consistently. That is my argument.
That's a pretty decent argument. Can I discuss some points?
Go ahead. That's why we're here.
Sure, cool. So overall, I'll just make a comment on the argument overall before I go on to the points I'd like to talk about within the argument. I think you've actually posed a very good antithesis to the whole pushing against edtech in general. I think the plan you gave, while there are some issues, I think overall is very workable, and it's not an easy plan, but I think it has the biggest payoff if you pull it off. Okay, so let's go through some points.
Go ahead.
There are side effects to edtech, which I mentioned before, which is overstimulation, which is why I would rather not have it in schools. But I think that's separate to your point, because what you're kind of covering is the technology in general, not in any specific domain. So let's sidestep that issue, because it's more of a research topic, and let's leave it to the experts. So second point. The moment it makes it big in an Android store, for example, and it gets a lot of attention, Google is going to take it down once the SJW's convenient heat shields make enough noise. So there is an issue of distribution.
Can I make a counterpoint there?
Sure.
Taking down a popular game has never backfired for them before, has it? Oh wait. Every single time that happens, it backfires. In fact, part of the plan is not just expecting them to take it down, it's hoping that they do. That'll just boost it. And then you go to places like Itch.io, or then you go to places like Greenlight, which is now dead. And again, that's another issue. Nobody talked about Stream Direct because these people are stupid idiots who don't know the game industry and don't know that that was an issue that would have gotten a bunch of game devs on your side. And it happened recently. But again, QQ and company are idiots. They don't understand the industry. But yeah, it will probably be taken down. And by that time, you will have made enough money. That's another thing, fear of monetization. Away with that. You've made enough money to take it to the App Store. Or you've made enough money to take it onto the new shit that Steam's doing. Or you made enough money to take it onto Itch.io. Itch.io is free, but whatever. And there's so many other platforms you could fucking go with. You could take it at that point, when it gets to that point. The Flappy Birds guy just needed a week. So,
sure.
Go ahead.
I actually agree with you, but I wanted you to address that point because it would have been a point that somebody would have mentioned after the video anyway.
Fair enough.
So yeah, you did a good job. Okay, so the third point is it's not enough to kind of do this online. This is why I'm kind of shifting away from social media in general, and I actually advocate something I used to advocate against, but in a different way. I still think meetups are cancer, like meetups where you meet up everybody.
Identity meetups are cancer.
Identity meetups, like Gamergate meetup, like LA, whatever. Stuff like that is cancer. That's how you get Koro to show up, basically. But that said, meetups with individual people that you've met over the course of whatever internet activism you've been involved in, I think that's actually very valuable. And kind of solidifying these links with people, which I've been doing very recently, by the way, around the world, at great expense. But look, I'll be frank, it's just kind of a mean point, but it has to be said. If you don't have money, you can't really play this game. You know, and you probably won't
counterpoint.
Much. So
counterpoint.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Disagree with the not much money. The plan I just expressed, if you use the, if you any of the things you use really, if you're not a super duper game developer, first off, Unity's free, so you could do it in Unity for free. The tools are free, but let's assume that the tools aren't free and you use, for example, RPG Maker that QQ has disparaged multiple times. It's stupid, so it must be easy to use, right? That would put you back, what, $50? And then after that, places like the Android store, that's $25. Places like the old Green Light, that's $99. Going to a game jam free, maybe it costs you between nothing to $20. I've been to them for 2 years. I've been to about at least a dozen and a half of them. Doesn't cost money to go there. And quite frankly, people whose lives are a mess, they're not meant for this plan anyway. But the idea that it costs a shit ton of money, it doesn't. It costs a shit ton of work and talent. That's why it was point number one, talent. Point number two, structure. When I said that these people can't be anonymous, the ultimate goal here, the ultimate goal of this is not to take that one game and change the world with it. The ultimate goal here is to demonstrate two things. Number one, that there is talent and that there is a way to fighting back in their own system. And number two, it solidifies connections between these people. You cannot have a connection with somebody when you're looking at the other side of the screen and you're seeing a furry avatar. There's no real connection there. People will say, yeah, you can make internet friends. It's not the same. It's much easier to backstab somebody who you've not seen his face and haven't shook his hand in real life than it is to do it to somebody you've only met on the internet. When you do this thing that I've explained, and in this plan there's 10 people. The grunts, the people on the lower, the soldiers, they can be anonymous, but they'll never really get further. The people that I've solidified, these 10 people who are not anonymous, who are doing these things, what will they really do? They will inspire others to do the exact same thing. And those grunts that were beneath them, that followed them, they're going to be, rather than push to give them money on Patreon or to applaud them or to say, oh my God, they're the best and white knight for them online, they're going to be interested in meeting them because these people are going to be pushing the idea of we need to solidify connections. And what's going to happen? You're going to get people from this army, this pool of anonymous soldiers who are going to start coming out. And you know what? Maybe they'll create a group that's parallel and they'll do the same thing but parallel. That'll have, its own staff of generals, all following the same idea, all following the lead of the leaders that we first pointed out. But you'll start creating these groups that are going to start popping up because talent attracts talent. People with interest attracts people with interest. And that's why I said that you don't just have the game developer. You have the YouTube guy, and you have the writer, and you have the guy on Twitter. All of them have a role in this. And they will say, you know what, if this motherfucker was safe, if nothing happened to him, if he's still alive, if this big boogeyman that they've tried to put out there doesn't work because he has talent, you know what, I'm going to come out there too. And the amount of people, which is why I think DDM was a failure to begin with because it took anything. It took whatever you could get. It had no standards because the people on top were garbage. I mean, Thidrin was garbage himself. How can he have standards? And that's why it attracted all of this cesspool of shit. And that's why they tried to be as moderate as possible. That's why Thidrin didn't want Revolt to separate. They want to keep everybody together because they'll take anything. Because they aren't leaders. They aren't role models. They aren't people who can do shit in real life. This system I just described, it breeds less anonymity and breeds more talent and more working in the real world and doing something. Notice that I kept it online in this example, but most game jams you have to go and meet people. I have met more people in this past 2 years than anybody who's been sitting online talking on DDM has in the last 5. Because the reality is when you go to these places, you meet people, you talk to people, you understand what's going on in the real world. And the real world is not filled with trannies who are becoming popular on YouTube, by the way. Never seen a tranny in real life. That should tell you something. They're super fucking visible online, but they don't exist in the real world. So you let the needs rot, and you eventually work towards what you just described, which I agree with. You need real world connections. It's time to stop it with this everybody needs to be anonymous bullshit. No, you don't. Because it hasn't worked for us, quite frankly. It hasn't worked. TRS was an example. Sargon was an example.
Yeah,
Thidrin and his goons are examples.
The experiment failed on multiple occasions through multiple faults. For example, Occupy Wall Street was an example where there was no standard. Anybody could show up, and so you got infiltrators and basically social engineers running the show eventually. Gamergate, anyone who could operate a YouTube stream became an e-celeb, and
in some cases,
obviously they have no standards.
In some cases, not even. Yeah, if you could operate a Twitter account, you could be big. Mombot, a Sicer,
Red Morgan and all that crap. Yeah. So when you choose from a pool of people, the so-called crowd wisdom always leads to someone outside the group working against it, basically, and eventually you start working against your own goals. Honestly, maybe it's because I'm old now or something, but I can't waste any more time on people I meet online. I prefer to meet them in person, whether they can fly to a location convenient to both of us, or if I'm in the area or something. Yeah, that's how I advocated. And when I meant you can't play this game unless you have money, I wasn't really referring to your plan per se, but what I'm advocating right now, which is this could only really function properly if people are willing to meet in person, and this usually means spending a decent chunk of money on travel, which you should really be able to do
Well, that's why
if you've
they've
done
tried to
something
make
useful
travel
in your life.
inaccessible and to make internet more attractive. That's why they've done that. That was intentional. But again, I mean, all of this, you shouldn't be actively trying to advocate for anything if your life's a mess. The entirety of your plan, it just means you have to be a functional member of society. You have to be a functional human being who can do things like move out of his parents' basement, or stop sleeping on your friend's sofa because you don't have a place to go. That's not a crazy notion that you should be functional before trying to influence others. Why are we listening to people who get a job at Taco Bell part-time and that is the best achievement they've had in the past 5 years? Those people should be trying to fix their lives. They should be worrying about themselves. Why are we listening to people who are so self-hating that they decide to become homosexuals or they decide to become transsexuals? Why are we listening to these people? They have their own issues. They should fix their life instead of us indulging in giving them attention and making them happy because they're miserable at the end. No, they should go fix themselves. They should find Jesus or something. But at the end of the day, I'm not saying that anonymity doesn't have a place. It does, but and that's in the Chan boards and the anonymous digging. Like, if you don't want to get involved and just want to do a dig, that's fine. But these pseudo-anons have proven to be cancer. These people who are quote-unquote anonymous, but they are very identifiable. QQ is anonymous. We don't know anything in his real life. Well, he thinks we don't know anything in his real life. Wink, wink. But, they can say whatever they want, but at the end, they don't have to practice what they preach. And that's what happened with Mike Enoch, and that should be the lesson we should have learned from that. And people haven't figured it out. The Sargon of Akkad, they talked a lot of shit, but then when you look at their real life, they're these failed game devs who only use game dev to become popular, who married a woman with a kid, who are literally defending their wife's daughter, who were followed by all these people who cared about race, and then it results that this guy has a bunch of black family. So it's you just fucking someone in the chat saying own it all. Yeah, I mean, I've never been afraid of being doxxed, and it's why they failed at trying to take me out. Because I have nothing to hide. I'm a regular guy who has aspirations and has worked towards them. And all they did every step of the way was demonstrate it. And it's why people like Fuzztail and company don't like me, because they don't like people who are proud of themselves and happy with their life, because deep down, or maybe in the surface, they're miserable. And that's the reality. And we should stop giving those people credit. None of those people will agree with this, and they'll say that we're anti-anonymity, and they'll say that anonymity is the best way to go, and oh my God, you just want to become more visible to the SJWs, and the reality is that they don't want you to meet them because they're ashamed. Deep down, the gays know, the lesbians know, all the rest of the degenerate crew know. They know what they're doing, and they're ashamed. That's why they don't want to meet you. People like Milo are very self-hating. They're very self-hating, which is why he wants all that attention and all that shit. If he could have done it pseudo-anonymously, he would have done it too. But he's a different flower. He's a different flower. He's a different kind of faggot. His narcissism goes so beyond. It's kind of like Thidrin. He's such a narcissist that he wants people to know who he is and ignore the fact that he's a failure and not point that out and applaud him. And that's why Think Serious failed. And that's why if you're a digger and you're working with Thidrin, everything you work with will fail. You should stay away from those people because, again, they're hypocrites. Thidrin doesn't want liberalism pushed by edtech, but he's a liberal. How do you figure that? Go, keep going with your points. Do you have any other ones?
All right. Yeah, I have one last point, but let's cap off the anonymity thing. I'm not saying anonymity is wrong. I actually think it's a very powerful tool, and sometimes it's very called for, especially with the situation now with SJWs targeting people's jobs, which is sort of a slight counterpoint to what you were saying. It's not, there are exceptions where people prefer to be pseudo-anonymous because they want to protect their livelihood, basically, and they wish to speak out.
Well, if,
There was
if that's,
actually a
if
lot
that's
of
the
people-
case, they should just be anonymous. Why be pseudo-anonymous? Just be anonymous.
amplify their message. It's actually, you're right. You're actually very right. It's better to be anonymous in that case. And that's basically what I will be for people who I won't meet. For people who I wish to meet, you'll know me very personally in the coming years. Yeah, for the rest, you'll see posts by me. Perhaps I'll come back on stream and we can discuss pertinent issues as they arise.
Well,
if you wish to have me on
if
again.
QQ finds his balls in Dan's purse, I have a feeling that it will be a three-way stream between you, me, and him. Maybe even, John, if John has the time and isn't working on the stuff he's working on, he can come on too. But
Sure, I'm up for that. Yeah, but like even without that, if you want to discuss something in the future, yeah, I mean, I could be pseudo-anonymous to that extent. But I'm pretty much quitting gamified social media. Probably be posting on 4chan mainly. The reason why I'm avoiding 8chan at this point is the numbers have dwindled to the point where you can sort of identify the poster based on their style and their message. So there is no anonymity on 8chan any longer. That's true of N-chan as well. It's all pseudo-anonymity as well. So, yeah.
I mean, something that I want to also make clear, as I said, anonymity has its place. If you look at history, it's always had its place, especially when revolutions are happening and stuff like that, and it's necessary. But eventually, you got to pick up the rifle. I'm not, metaphorically and sometimes literally, and you have to say, yes, I'm here and I will die for my ideals. And here's an issue I have. When I first got here and I decided to kill my anonymity myself, right at the beginning, because I was doing the AJSA stuff and I didn't want to be identified as a troll. People like Thidrin told me that's a mistake. You shouldn't have done that. That's terrible. Well, I've been at this for 2+ years. I did the SJW Gamer mocking SJWs. I shat on Joe. I shat on Sargon. I shat on Thidrin. And it wasn't the liberal SJW boogeyman that tried to dox me or fuck with my family. It was the people in the Ralph clique and DDM and those motherfuckers who were on what is the carcass of Revolt now. It wasn't these big bad liberals that were trying to get me. The reality is the liberals don't have the numbers, and they're terrible at, like, the normal liberal, the normal embody Ghazi liberal, a gamer Ghazi liberal on Reddit. They suck at digging. So they're not the ones that are going to get you. The ones that are going to get you are on top, don't have the time to get every single one of us. So that boogeyman that the liberals are going to fuck with your life, it's not the liberals. It's the people who are quote-unquote on your side that are doing it. Every time I look at this, every time someone was fucked with, it was someone who was quote-unquote on our side, but they never really were. These people I've mentioned, they're not on your side, and they never were. They're the ones doing these things. It's not this, like, the liberal boogeyman will dox a big influential person, or will dox a person here and there.
Do you mind if I give you an example? Do you mind if I give you an example that demonstrates your point?
Go ahead.
Okay, so do you guys remember Jim, big old Jim, back when he was in Gamergate in a big way?
Yeah.
Most people don't know this, but he was blackmailed, and that's part of the reason why he left. And it was, in the end, it came out in the wash that it was a very butthurt loser pretending to be a girl running a major Twitter account on Gamergate who got pissed off because Jim basically fingered, sorry to say this on air, he did something explicit
He finger banged Jade on air. That's the reference.
Yeah.
That's how people know.
And one loser got butthurt and went off to Jim. So can you imagine
Can I
the
guess
damage?
if that, I'm going to take a guess. Is that person a homosexual by any chance?
Well, he's pretending to be a girl, and he's into
an e-tranny
girls, so I don't know. so, I mean, there's something there, I mean, I never pretended to be a girl. Like, I used a very cute avatar mainly because I like this character. Love, to have something that disarms
There
whatever
was so
I'm
many
saying.
memes of fucking Neptunia that I ended up buying Hyperdimension Neptunia, and I need to get back to playing it. I'm not done with that. I need to
It's not
finish
a
that.
bad game. You know, it gets
It's
a
good.
lot
I
of
like it.
shit, but it's not a bad
I like that
game.
weeboo shit. I
So,
don't have an issue with weeboo shit. I like weeboo shit. Uh, so if that's my embarrassing thing that they can get, I mean, finally there it is, something they can
and,
get Verlo on. He likes weeboo shit. Um, but
yeah, and like on that point, Neptunia has a good message overall. I think it's got a very nationalistic message in the
nationalistic
undertones, at
messages
least.
are always good. But here's something that I don't. I hate cutting you off so much, and I'm still going to do it because apparently I don't have any self control. But here's something I wanted to make clear because a lot of people are saying, "Well, Verlo, you just created a plan which puts you as the top as a leader. You're self-indulgent." Yeah, this is what I've been doing. Like, spoiler, guys, it's not that I left Twitter because people doxed me and they were being mean to me. No, it's because I've been doing real life shit. I've gained all this knowledge and I understand how this game industry works and I know all of these things because I've been practicing what I fucking preach. And that's something Thidrin was always afraid of. People who listened to me gravitated to what I was saying because they know that I believe it. I might not be right on everything, but I fucking believe it, which is more than what these idiots say or actually can fucking show. They change their opinion on a dime. Like, fucking look at fucking QQ, Mister. I'm all about ethics now, creating clickbait to get people to look at a site, and concerned about the economy of his site. So, and what I'm suggesting, the type of plan I'm suggesting, go out there and claim it to be your own. I don't care, do it, but what I'm suggesting, it also allows people to make money because I understand that there is this. I don't have an issue with making money, by the way. I don't have an issue in and of itself of Jim creating a Patreon. I have an issue with his pseudo anonymity and the fact that he's into being honest as to what the fuck's going on. But which I think would solve a lot of issues if we just do that. No one could blackmail him. No one could do anything to him. You don't have to tell people where you live. Just tell them who you are. Who gives a shit? It creates jobs. It creates. I'm Trump now. I'm creating fucking jobs. It creates a place and a role for different aptitudes of people. People who can draw are necessary. And I haven't even gotten into just in the game thing. There's so many people who could participate. But in the after, what comes after the pushing it around, the talking about it, the YouTubing it, the let's playing it, the reviewing it, all that shit. It creates different job opportunities. It creates different abilities. It creates people who can demonstrate skill. And it creates, people talked a lot about how we need to fix the media. You don't fix the media by complaining about Polygon. You don't even fix the media by creating lewd gamer. You don't fix the media in that way. What you fix the media doing is you demonstrate legitimate skill and you do things the way you think they should be done. And you're legitimate and honest. And even if your way isn't the best, you're fucking transparent and say, I do things this way. I give games, if games push degeneracy, I give them a bad grade. And no one will claim that you're doing things underhandedly because they can't. And it just baffles my, like, we're not learning from what's going on with PewDiePie right now. And I know a lot of people are saying that he's doing it for attention, and he probably is. But, like, I believe, and that was the entire allure of YouTubers, by the way, that they believed what they were saying, that these were real people. Now they're companies, and people forget that. People forget that Markiplier is a company, forget PewDiePie is a company, they forget Angry Joe is a company. They're not people just like you. They don't give a shit about you. But the message people get from PewDiePie is that he believes what the fuck he's saying, and he doesn't legitimately give a fuck. Now, we know he's kind of a shill. We know that there's probably an issue there. But the message you should take is that being consistent with your beliefs and not being a fucking moderate, which is what QQ and company are, that's what gets people to believe in what you're saying and to listen to you. You can say whatever you want about me, but every time I start one of these streams, you get 10 to 20 people coming here. And you say, that's nothing, it's from a YouTube perspective. Yeah, you're right, it's nothing. But if I were to meet those 10 to 20 people in real life, and we decide to do fucking something, I bet you would make a difference real damn quick. So, I don't know, man.
Oh, that's for sure.
So, it's just, it's bullshit, it's bad for you, and I think the cherry on top is the fact that there's so much bullshit coming from these people that they're not even man enough to come here and defend their shit. I mean, if I was an edtech shill and they were pushing these edtech, which is just video games, as they were saying, and don't know what the fuck they're talking about, coming on stream and dunking me would only further their message. But the reality is they're afraid of me because they understand that I'm smarter than them. They understand I know what I'm talking about, and they understand I actually believe what I'm saying, unlike them. I'm not saying what's flavor of the month like they are. So, it's just that. And the same goes with
I
Kelly,
think
by
it's
the
a
way.
good invitation, at least.
Yeah.
I think it's a good invitation, and it's a chance to talk more about the issue. That's one thing actually that isn't being done. When you have a new technology, there should be a public discussion by people who know what they're talking about, and
Well, there used to
that's
be
not really
when
being done
edtech
either.
started in the 90s, but that conversation has been
Yeah,
quickly
but
quieted for reasons that we all understand.
yeah, precisely. hmm hmm So we do need to have these conversations, and we do need to look at issues holistically. We need to keep up with the current research without taking it as gospel, because there's a lot of garbage paper out there. There's a lot of unreproducible research out there. So you can't really do this if you're not in it. Like, I'm not advocating for academia. That's not something I'm doing, but
I'm
you do
not.
have
I'm,
to be
I'm
in the
certainly not.
game.
I'm certainly not. I'm the
Yeah,
first.
yeah.
That's something they
But you
forget.
do
I'm the first
understand.
person saying that getting degrees doesn't make you skilled, and I have 3 of them, and
It
I'm telling
doesn't.
you, don't do it. And these people,
It doesn't. But you have
yeah.
to
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go
you
ahead.
have to be in the game. Like, that's fine. You have to be in the game to really understand this stuff. So if you haven't really critically peer-reviewed a paper, for example, you don't really stand a chance to find out where it falls apart at the seams.
I th-
Everything has some issue in it. Nothing is quite perfect, and some is just complete garbage. And that's kind of the problem. You have to pick out the good papers
yeah.
and
We have to
yeah,
stop it
have
with the
experience in that.
easy shit, and we have to stop it with the, like, to add on to what you said. I think the word that perfectly describes because we disagree on some things clearly, but we agree on a lot. And I think the one thing that we agree on is that we need less LARPers around, and that is a word somebody said at the beginning, and I was saving it for now. We need people we need to stop listening to people who are LARPing, who are pretending, who we don't really know what they're saying, who aren't, they're willing to talk, but when it comes to putting their shit on the line, they won't do it. They won't walk the walk. And that's the reality of all these people I've talked about, of the QQs and companies. And they pretend. And make no mistake, I'm not saying that the people whose identity we know, like Ralph, for example, or Sargon, they're LARPers too. In a different way, they lost their anonymity, which they would have preferred to keep, but they're LARPers in their own way. Like, this, in the case of Ralph, he pretends to be this guy who is indignant when it comes to Black Lives Matter beating up the police, and he's going to jail for beating up the police. So these people are all LARPers. These people are LARPers, and we need to stop listening to them. But above all, you said we have to continue dialogue, and I agree, dialogue is important. But what I'm advocating for is we need to go beyond dialogue at this point. Somebody said in the chat that the problem with Thinner is he never presented logistical solutions to what we were doing. He never presented a plan that was detailed, that we knew where we were going, we knew what we were doing. And that's the reality. He never did that. I'm saying let's take action. And if the easiest action is to play inside their own game and force them to break the game themselves, that's what always works. That is what always works. Look at history. Every time you do something like that you force them to break their own bullshit, when you have people doing on behind the scenes conniving bullshit, then it always breaks down when you play their own game and beat them at it. And if they're as incompetent as QQ and company have said, I can make a better game, I'm convinced, than Zoe Quinn, Sargon, and Brianna Wu. I'm convinced. In fact, I've done it. And the reality is that these people, they don't know what I'm doing in real life, because there's no purpose anymore for them to dig, because they found all of this stuff and say the more we dig, the worse it hurts us. And I have every intention of unifying what I'm doing in real life. I've given enough clues that people should be able to find it. But again, it goes back to incompetence, and it goes back to point number 1, you need talent. These people don't have talent. So we need less LARPers. We need more people who are willing to put their ass on the line. We need more people who are willing to fucking stand up for their convictions, stand up for their shit, and actually and stop it with the role playing, and stop it with the fucking 4D chess. I mean, Thidrin's playing like 10D chess at this point. There's so much chess going on in his mind, so many levels, so many different dimensions, and it never works. It never fucking works, and you keep getting beaten, because at the end of the day, it's time to start doing shit. It's time to start really making a difference, start meeting people in real life. And if you can't do all of that, your life's a mess. Fix that. Get off the internet. Stop jerking off to porn and go actually get a job. You'll need it. So, is there anything you would like to add? Because it's been 3 hours and I got shit to do. And
Yeah, same here. No, I think we've pretty much covered things, and thanks for having me on. And
oh shit, I
maybe we
forgot. I
can
forgot to
see
ask
you.
you to. Okay, now that you've heard all of my things, all of my stuff, the same question to Coral. You can now become my apprentice, and like Kelly before you, you can kneel to me, and I can show you the promised land. Cora rejected it, and he was deleted. So, something to think about for the future. Anyway, I think that's all. You said you're done. You're welcome. Thank you for coming on. I think this is going to happen again because this is obviously going to have backlash. These people are afraid of people who tell the truth and who are honest to their own convictions. So I expect that to happen. And as usual, I'm not afraid of it. They just they did their worst and they couldn't do jack shit. So as for Jim, I can see you, Top Hat Coyote, talking a lot about Jim. We'll see where it goes. I don't know how this road ends for him in any other way than selling out. Like, he thinks things haven't changed, and honest to God, I want to believe him where he is just that naive. But I don't know. I'm gonna pay attention to what Jim does now. So,
Same here.
he's saying Jim got dumped. Did Jade dump him? Is that what he's referring to? I don't know.
I think he got dumped ages ago. Like, that's really old news. It's got nothing to do with anything.
Well, allegedly Jade recently bought him a new video card.
What the hell?
He said that on Twitter
Well,
the other day.
maybe it's not true then.
Maybe he got another girlfriend. Who
Well,
knows?
that's one thing. That's one fruitful thing that came out of Gamergate for him, I guess. He met Jade. That's another example that demonstrates my point that if you're gonna spend all this time getting to know people, you should probably meet them in person, individually, not in a group. That's cancer.
Yeah, individually is the way to do it. You meet people individually. And what bothers me is that's what places like TRS were advocating for. They were advocating for meeting people. They were advocating for creating these little cells. They were doing it because this big revolution with guns was coming, and they like LARPing. And also, like, I guess we'll leave this as a cliffhanger in another stream. The most important issue, what is it? Is it race mixing? Is it degeneracy? Is it invasion of our culture? Is it all the above? Is it a combination? That would be something. Spoiler for me, degeneracy is the number one thing we need to address. And you notice that for people like QQ and company, it's race mixing because they're degenerates and they don't want to talk about their degeneracy and their disgusting sexual activities. So anyway, guys, thanks for coming. 16 of you fuckers are here. Thank you for coming here, Ethisucks. There's nothing you want to plug, I'm assuming, based off of our conversation. Am I correct? Nothing you want to plug, right?
Nothing.
Okay.
No.
So,
Just plug this channel if you want to see me on. I'll probably be on here. I won't be on any social media. I basically, if you want to listen to what I have to say, this will be the only place you probably can see me.
well, there you go. Exclusivity here. Well, you might be going on Kelly's channel because again, unlike the rest of the YouTube community, I can't stream every 2 days. So, and you can't stream every 2 days either. So, but yeah, you need. That's pretty much it, fuckers. Low quality stream that was at one point hijacked by the Jews. That's a tradition here on my channel. And I guess I'll see you when I see you. Balls in your court, Thidrin and company. Let's see what you do with it. So later, everybody.